All right, and I'm going to say good morning, everybody. Welcome to our summer workshop, virtual experience, because even though, as Vic pointed out, our pandemic is kind of kind of starting to come to an end, we still just really need to be mindful and be safe. So happy that you can join us virtually this morning. If you attended our spring workshop, we thank you kindly for that, and we're glad to have you back today. If you did not attend the spring workshop, you can find a recording of that. I will put that link to where you can find that recording in the box today. We do have a fairly full day today. We will plan to meet from 10 to noon. I'll turn it over to Vic in just a moment to do some welcoming as well, but I do want to quickly review the agenda. And folks, I will apologize because, again, this lingering cough, I thought it was allergies. Who knows what it is, but regardless, I'll be sipping water and sucking on cough drops today. So right out of the gate today, we have some welcome. We'll be doing some introductions and updates from the 21st Century and the Iowa After School Alliance. That'll be handled by Vic and Emily Harris. And then we'll be turning over the presentation to our friends at St. Mark's, Ron and Taylor, who will be introducing us to the KCG curricula. So that'll be kind of an interesting day. We'll take a quick half-an-hour break for lunch. And then from 12:30 to 2 o'clock, we'll be having our guest presenter, Malai Amsar, with Dr. Anthony, I just got a notification, with Dr. Anthony Jones from the Ames Community School District that will be doing our second round of equity, diversity, and inclusion information for us. And that's how we'll wrap up our day. So with that being said, I'd like to just quickly turn it over to Vic. And Vic, if you have a few words that you want to say and or any updates that you'd like to provide, now would be a good time to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. Well, I'd like to welcome all of you to this second of our workshops. And hope you're all looking forward to face-to-face in Des Moines as we revive in September our Impact After School Conference. We have a committee, our PD committee, that helps select a lot of the content in these workshops and events. And we also go over the PD forms that you send us to see what PD that you are needing. Because we try to provide something that you can use in your programs. That's very important to us. We're all hopeful that by September we'll have everything. Our programs will be up and running 100% again, and that we'll be serving kids to the maximum capacity once more. So, I want to thank you again, and hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Vic. Okay, so now at this point, I do want to take just a quick moment to have people come on and introduce themselves. I'm going to stop sharing so we can see each other on the screen. And if it's okay with you, I think what we'll do is I'll just call you out on screen as I see you. If you would just introduce yourself, tell us who you are, the school or site that you're associated with, and maybe one thing you're looking forward to this summer, program-wise or personally, whichever you prefer. So, all right, Lynn, I have you first on my screen.
Hi, Crystal. Lynn Redenbaugh, Storm Lake Elementary School. Looking forward this summer to working on getting things back to normal for our fall program. We don't do a summer program here in Storm Lake, so it's just prepping for the new year.
All right, thanks, Lynn. Glad to have you on the call today. Melissa, I have you next.
Hi, I'm Melissa Hostetler. I am at Alexander Elementary in Iowa City, and I am really just looking forward to a summer with kids, creating that supportive community.
All right, thanks, Melissa. Glad you could join us. Tasia, I have you next.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Tasia McCloskey. I am in Iowa City Community School District. And I am looking forward, the same as Mel, just being back with the kids and getting back to a somewhat normal summer and having fun.
Great. Thanks, Tasia.
Mhm.
Mary?
Hi, I'm Mary Gorley, and I work at Hoagland Marshalltown School, and I'm looking forward to going to Colorado this summer.
Oh, Mary, we're all jealous of you now. Thanks for sharing that. So, Megan, I have you next.
I'm Megan. I'm the project director at Youthport in Cedar Rapids. And I'm just looking forward to a pretty normal summer for our program.
Yeah, it's kind of nice to get back to a sense of normalcy, isn't it? So, Barb, I have you next, if you're able to come on audio.
I'll be on and off audio because we're in a whole new building and it's a really old building and our internet's just nuts here. But I'm Barb Schmitz and I'm from Owine. We have close to 300 students in our summer program and it's in full swing. And I love every minute of it, but I might be ready by, July 11th to be done for a little break. Please understand. But it's going great so far. It's day 2 and I'm very pleased at our turnout. So that's where I'm at.
Good. And again, no judgment here, Barb. We get it. Working with kids is awesome and it's awesomely exhausting sometimes. So yes. Okay, so Taylor, I have you next, but I see you have another person on screen with you, so I'll let you both introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Taylor Knoll. We're with St. Mark Youth Enrichment. I am looking forward to our summer program. We started up here in a couple of weeks, and we really haven't seen kids all that much throughout the school year, so I'm excited to see the kiddos again.
Hey, I'm Ron with Taylor at St. Mark, and yeah, I'm just excited to go back to a normal summer. Really excited to have the kids back, so yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, you two. Chuck, I have you next.
Hi, I'm Chuck Binge. I'm the curriculum director for Fairfield School District. And we are going to expand our after-school program to 2 more schools next year. So I'm really excited about having a kindergarten through 6th grade program, after-school program, whereas before we've only had 2 2nd grade through 4th grade. So very excited about that for next year.
Yeah, that is exciting, Chuck. That's good to hear you guys are expanding down there in Fairfield. So, all right, Alex, I have you next.
Morning, Alex Rice. I'm a nonprofit consultant with a background in after-school program management and summer programs, and I am looking forward to spending some time in the garden this summer.
Yes, Alex, I'm glad to hear I have a fellow gardener on the call today. So before I move on, I do want to take just a quick mini time out here to say, as you just heard, Alex is not actually associated with the 21st Century program. We did open today's workshop to other out-of-school time providers as well. So we're very happy to see familiar faces and perhaps a little less familiar face on the call today. So thanks, Alex. Nikki, I have you next.
Good morning. Nikki Clausen. I'm the program director for the 21st Century programs at Council Bluffs in Council Bluffs, Iowa. And I would say as much as I've enjoyed working all year long, I'm really excited to spend some time with my own kids. And we're going to try to just do a little traveling, and I'm going to join Mary and we're going to go to Colorado as well with the kids in a couple weeks.
Very nice. Yeah, your kids will love that, Nikki. That's such a great place to visit. So, Christina. And Christina, she did tell me that she does have kids in programming, so she may have had to step away. Christina, are you able to come on? All right, let's try Ashley.
Hi, I'm Ashley, and I work with Davenport schools through the Stepping Stones program. In the summer, technically we are still in school until next week on the 16th. So I I know Shani and Crystal, we may be in and out just getting stuff ready for programming this afternoon. But we're looking forward to kicking off our 21st Century Summer Sites, and we have parents coming in filling out paperwork and stuff today, so we may be in and out, but we've got audio going.
That's awesome. Thank you for that update then, Ashley. Katie, I have you next.
Hi, I'm Katie Boatwright. I'm from Fairfield Community School District with Chuck. I am the program director for the after school programming. So I'm going to be super busy this summer getting ready for those 2 new programs that we're starting at new schools, as well as preparing for the next year with our current program that we have at the 2 through 4 building.
Yeah, that's great. Again, that's really good news to hear down there. Amber, are you able to come on?
Hi, I'm Amber. I'm from the Burlington School District, and I have the After School Pieces program. We don't have a whole lot of activities planned over the summer, but I'm ready to get back to normal.
Yes, thanks for joining us, Amber. The other Crystal, who spells her name just like mine.
Hi, I'm Crystal Simmons. I'm with the Davenport School District. And like Ashley said, we're still working on enrolling everyone. We're currently doing our full year program right now. So I'm just kind of looking forward to somewhat of a normal summer and being able to experience that this year.
Great, thank you. Beth, I have you next.
Okay, Beth Christopher, Alan McKee Schools. I guess this summer I am finishing up with Virginia. She's retiring June 30th. We're 2 weeks into summer programming. I'm thankful that she stuck around to help with summer programming for me. And also getting things set up for the fall with our new person, Kathy Krupa. So yeah, busy.
Good news there, and congrats to Virginia for all of the, that's awesome. So, okay, Trisha, you're next on my screen, but it looks like you're maybe moving around some kids. So, Trisha, are you able to just come on and say hi real quick?
Yes, hold on. I'm in a room full of kids.
Yeah.
Sorry, I feel like nothing's working out the way it was supposed to. All right. Sorry, would you just a hi?
Just a hi, and where you're from, Trisha?
North Fayette Valley Elementary.
Okay, and are you looking forward to something this summer?
A lot of camping. Spending time with. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Thanks for joining us, Trisha.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, Janae, I have you next.
Hi, I'm Janae Jones. I'm at Swain and Hills in Iowa City, and I'm looking forward to supporting and just engaging and having fun with the kids this summer.
Awesome. Thanks, Janae. Natalie?
Hi, I'm Natalie Hall. I'm with Burlington Community School District. We have the Pieces After School program, and I am looking forward to planning community partner visits and getting our community partners back in the schools in the fall. We have a really exciting back to school party planned in August, so we're just looking forward to a little return of normalcy here.
That's awesome. Good to hear those back to school events are already being planned too. That's great. Shani, I have you next. Oh, she says, hi everyone, this is Shani Ford. Her district internet is unstable and she's the director of the Davenport Stepping Stone program. Looking forward to get our 21st Century Sites ready for fulfilling summer. Very good. Thanks, Shani. Brittany, I actually have you next if you'd like to do a quick introduction.
No.
Hi, Brittany. Can you, I can hear you, but just barely.
Sorry, I'm back in the office, so trying to navigate headphones and things like that. Hi, everybody. Brittany Samuelson, Network Lead at the Iowa After School Alliance, and I am excited to do some traveling this summer. and do some more wedding planning for my wedding in the fall.
Yeah, very good. Okay, Dawn. Is Dawn able? Yeah, there. Hi, Dawn. Oh, Dawn, we don't have audio. Okay. Dawn, I'm sorry, we don't have audio. We didn't hear what you said, but it's good to see your face. All right. I think we're up to Nicole and Dawn. If you want to pop something in the chat, we'd love to have that, Dawn. Nicole, are you able to come on?
Hey everybody, Nicole Schleif here with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Central Iowa in Des Moines. We are also on day 2 of our summer program, so very busy, very exciting. Same as everybody else, excited to kind of return to some normalcy. Excited to be able to have volunteers and other partners kind of come back into the clubs as well.
Great, thank you. And I believe last but not least, but if I've forgotten somebody, we'll come back to you in just a moment. I have Karen.
Oh, hello.
Hi, Karen.
Hi, sorry I'm a little late to the Zoom meeting. I'm Karen Balden with Sylvan Learning Centers, and we're busy all summer providing programming. So we're excited, and I have to leave here shortly because we're heading to West Des Moines. So, but I'll stay tuned as long as I can.
Perfect. Thanks for joining us, Karen. Did I miss anybody with the exception of Emily, who I'm going to turn it over to here in just a moment? If I did, please feel free to unmute and just introduce yourself real quick. Okay. Emily, I'll turn it over to you. So folks, this is Emily Harris. She's my co-worker with the Iowa After School Alliance. She does all of our communication stuff and she is fabulous. So I'll have you direct your attention to her now.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the good introduction, Crystal. Much appreciated. We are working at the IAA right now to map the needs and the current landscape of after school, summer, and before school programming across the state. And so we've developed a community needs assessment. And we're going to take a couple minutes here this morning to just give you time to complete that now so that you don't have to block it off later. It only takes about 10 minutes. But it's really important that we have the information so that we know what we need to be offering for supports, what we need to be asking for at the state level to help support after school, summer, and before school programming. And as well just to join the directory because we get quite a few calls into the Iowa After School Alliance of parents asking, hey, I really need a program for my child to attend. Where do I go? This is where I live. So if you want to be included in the directory as well, that's at the end of this survey, it would be a lot of help so that we have a comprehensive directory of what's available in the school, in the state. So I will go ahead and we'll walk through this survey a little bit, and then I will also put the link in the chat so you can take it. Let me get back to the dashboard here, sorry. Oh. Here we go. All right, guys. I might do the communications, but I'm not tech savvy. I thought I had it open. In the meantime, Crystal, do you know where I go?
Yeah, Emily, I think you need to go to preview and score.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I had it on collect. Okay. All right. So just some basics here at the beginning, the name of your program, who we can contact in regards to your program, and how we can contact them by email. And then you're going to select what opportunities and time sessions that you offer, and what kind of programming, whether that be private, 21st century, if it's just a pop-up or drop-in program, other typical enrichment activities you offer on a somewhat daily basis. This is a check all that apply so that we know what youth will get in your program if they attend. Listing off some of your community partners, telling us what your funding sources are. And then if you need any current support to build or expand your after school, summer, or before school programming, you can select any of these sections and we can help you with that. A little bit of a discussion about the Future Ready Iowa initiative and whether or not you're currently participating in anything that falls under Future Ready Iowa. Again, more supports for if you need to develop any of these Future Ready Iowa sectors. A little bit about career exploration and career pathways, and if you offer anything, and if you need help looking at career exploration. And then finally, whether or not you'd be interested in pairing with the mentoring program, in which we'd pair you with a similar program in the similar geographical area as you, so that you guys can work together closely and have some more dialogue about what you're doing at your sites and what you can do to expand and help each other. And then finally, if it loads, there we go. This is the directory part of the survey. So if you would like to be listed in the directory, you'll just click yes, and then give us the basic information that we can initially list in the directory. And then in the future, either I or somebody at the Iowa After School Alliance will reach out to provide or gather more information to put together a more comprehensive bio of what the program is, where it's located, and what activities are offered, if there's a cost for service, etc. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to put the link in the chat, and we'll take the next, we have like 5 minutes, Crystal?
Yeah.
And you can take the next 5 minutes to at least get started. You might actually even finish in that time, but if you could just take this time to complete the survey now, that would be much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you for that. So again, the chat link has the link. We will email this out afterwards as well. So if you're on your phone or something and it's not necessarily conducive to grabbing the SurveyMonkey link at this point, we'll go ahead and get that sent out to you as well. Another good time to do this might be over the lunch break. So we'll have you think about that. While you're grabbing that survey and maybe starting to pull that up, the only other update that I wanted to share with everyone today is that it is the end of the fiscal year. So we're starting to kind of do our wrap up and clean up of our email lists, our committee rosters, things of that nature. So yesterday, Emily and I both sent out emails asking people to confirm their participation in committees moving forward. And if you are no longer going to be a part of a committee, if there's another committee you'd like to join, or if you have a staff replacement, I think that would be good information to have as well. Some of you I know are perhaps leaving the site that you're with, so maybe that's a retirement or something of that nature. But it's always good to have that information as well. So if you could please shoot us an email, respond to that email that we sent out yesterday, and let us know if that's if you plan to continue in that role. That's always greatly appreciated. So we will take about a 3-minute break right now for you to complete the survey. Stretch, get a cup of coffee. At 10:30. Which will be, again, in about 3 minutes, we're going to turn it over to Ron and Taylor for their part of the presentation. So thank you, everyone. Again, we have about a 3-minute break now. All right, everybody, I hope you had a nice quick break there. At this point in the presentation, I'm going to turn it over to Taylor Knoll and Ron Parr with St. Mark's Youth Enrichment. They have a fantastic presentation for us today. If you could signal to me that you're back on the call by maybe giving me either turning on your camera or giving me a reaction, perhaps a thumbs up. There we go. Awesome. Taylor and Ron have assured me that this is going to be a really fun, engaging, and interactive presentation today. So we're really hoping that you can join in all of the activities and be as engaged as possible with this. So with that being said, Taylor and Ron, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Crystal. Hey, everybody. So it's nice to see a lot of familiar faces, some new faces. We're excited you could be with us this morning. And yeah, we're pumped to start talking about this new curriculum that we have. So I'm gonna let Taylor talk a little bit about St. Mark.
So to give you guys some background information, if you don't already know, Ron and I are both program directors at St. Mark. So we work with school year summer programs, and we use a lot of SEL with our staff, our students, and our parents. And we're very excited to get to know all of you today and get to work through this workshop with you.
Yeah, so like Crystal said, this will be a pretty interactive presentation. We'll have some breakout sessions. You'll have opportunities to ask questions. But like Taylor said, we like to get to know some of the people on this call. And if you're interested in the No Choose Give curriculum that we'll be talking about, we can find some time to connect later in the week or via Zoom, email, and kind of take next steps from there. So for today, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing our screen. We have started a little PowerPoint that we'll be sharing. Okay. So Crystal, if you could give us a thumbs up if you can see that. Perfect. All right. So today we'll be talking about emotional intelligence, and we'll be talking about a curriculum that we're using to implement it into decision making. We'll be talking about what emotional intelligence is, why emotional intelligence is important, and we're going to start to dip our toes into how to implement emotional intelligence. So today is just a little teaser for the No Choose Give curriculum. Like I said, if this is something that you're interested in, we can definitely set up a time to talk independently a little bit later about some next steps. But like I said, we're really excited to get to know some of you guys and to hear what initiatives that you are making in emotional intelligence. And yeah, just to have some general conversation. So before we really get into the meat of it, we've got a little video that we'll be showing. This is a pretty long video. It's about 9 minutes. So when we watch it, just watch with an open mind. Just think about what it means to you. And then we'll take a second to pause and to share a little bit out after the video. But Crystal, when we start the video, if you could give us a thumbs up if you can hear the audio. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play. Again, just think about what the video means to you, and we'll have a second to share after the video is finished.
There are these two young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says,
The volume needs to go up, guys.
and the two young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and goes, what the hell is water?
We'll turn it up here on the computer.
Do you have it set up to share the audio through the computer?
Oops. Let's see here. So
Emily, are you asking that to me or Ron and Taylor?
would we go to settings to do that here?
No, you'll go to settings inside of Zoom. So you'll go to share screen and then you'll do advanced sharing and then share audio.
Share screen, advanced. Do you know where that is?
I think if you click the green thing. Oh, advanced right here.
Ah, gotcha.
There we go.
Okay.
Thank you, Emily.
No problem. I hate video on Zoom because for some reason it never works for me.
All right. Well, let us know if that works better.
There are these two young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, morning, boys, how's the water? And the two young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and goes, what the hell is water? The point of the fish story is merely that the most obvious, important realities are often the ones that are hardest to see and talk about. Stated as an English sentence, of course, this is just a banal platitude. But the fact is that in the day-to-day trenches of adult existence, banal platitudes can have a life or death importance. The plain fact is that you graduating seniors do not yet have any clue what day in, day out really means. There happen to be whole, large parts of adult American life that nobody talks about in elementary school. One such part involves boredom, routine, and petty frustration. The parents and older
Ron, unmute yourself so we can hear you.
Challenging white collar college graduate job, and you work hard for 8 or 10 hours, and at the end of the day, you're tired and somewhat stressed, and all you want is to go home and have a good supper and maybe unwind for an hour and then hit the sack early, because of course you have to get up the next day and do it all again. Then you remember there's no food at home. You haven't had time to shop this week because of your challenging job. And so now after work, you have to get in your car and drive to the supermarket. It's the end of a work day and the traffic is apt to be very bad. So getting to the store takes way longer than it should. And when you finally get there, the supermarket is very crowded because of course it's the time of day when all the other people with jobs also try to squeeze in some grocery shopping. But you can't just get in and quickly out. You have to wander all over the huge overlit stores, confusing aisles to find the stuff you want. And you have to maneuver your junky cart through all these other tired, hurried people with carts, et cetera, cutting stuff out because it's a long ceremony. And eventually you get all your supper supplies, except now it turns out there aren't enough checkout lanes open, even though it's the end of the day rush. So the checkout line is incredibly long, which is stupid and infuriating, but you can't take your frustration out on the frantic lady working the register, who is overworked at a job whose daily tedium and meaninglessness surpasses the imagination of any of us here at a prestigious college. But anyway, you finally get to the checkout line's front, you pay for your food, and get told to have a nice day in a voice that is the absolute voice of death. And then you have to take your creepy, flimsy plastic bags of groceries in your cart with the one crazy wheel that pulls maddeningly to the left, all the way out through the crowded, bumpy, littery parking lot. And then you have to drive all the way home through slow, heavy, SUV-intensive rush hour traffic, et cetera, et cetera. Everyone here has done this, of course, but it hasn't yet been part of you graduates' actual life routine, day after week, after month, after year, but it will be. And many more dreary, annoying, seemingly meaningless routines besides. But that is not the point. The point is that petty, frustrating crap like this is exactly where the work of choosing is going to come in. Because the traffic jams and crowded aisles and long checkout lines give me time to think. And if I don't make a conscious decision about how to think and what to pay attention to, I'm going to be pissed and miserable every time I have to shop. Because my natural default setting is the certainty that situations like this are really all about me, about my hungriness and my fatigue and my desire to just get home. And it's going to seem for all the world like everybody else is just in my way. And who are all these people in my way? And look at how repulsive most of them are and how stupid and cow-like and dead-eyed and non-human they seem in the checkout line. Or at how annoying and rude it is that people are talking loudly on cell phones in the middle of the line. And look at how deeply, personally unfair this is. If I choose to think this way in the store and on the freeway, fine. Lots of us do. Except thinking this way tends to be so easy and automatic that it doesn't have to be a choice. It is my natural default setting. It's the automatic way that I experience the boring, frustrating, crowded parts of adult life when I'm operating on the automatic, unconscious belief that I am the center of the world and that my immediate needs and feelings are what should determine the world's priorities. The thing is that, of course, there are totally different ways to think about these kinds of situations. In this traffic, all these vehicles stuck and idling in my way, it's not impossible that some of these people in SUVs have been in horrible auto accidents in the past and now find driving so terrifying that their therapist is all that ordered them to get a huge, heavy SUV so they can feel safe enough to drive. Or I can choose to force myself to consider the likelihood that everyone else in the supermarket's checkout line is just as bored and frustrated as I am, and that some of these people probably have much harder, more tedious or painful lives than I do. Again, please don't think I'm giving you moral advice or that I'm saying you're supposed to think this way or that anyone expects you to just automatically do it, because it's hard. It takes will and effort. And if you are like me, some days you won't be able to do it, or you just flat out won't want to. But most days, if you're aware enough to give yourself a choice, you can choose to look differently at this fat, dead-eyed, over-made-up lady who just screamed at her kid in the checkout line. Maybe she's not usually like this. Maybe she's been up 2 straight nights holding the hand of her husband who's dying of bone cancer. Or maybe this very lady is the low-wage clerk at the motor vehicles department You just yesterday helped your spouse resolve a horrific, infuriating red tape problem through some small act of bureaucratic kindness. Of course, none of this is likely, but it's also not impossible. It just depends what you want to consider. If you're automatically sure that you know what reality is and who and what is really important, if you want to operate on your default setting, then you, like me, probably won't consider possibilities that aren't annoying and miserable. But if you really learn how to think, how to pay attention, then you will know you have other options. It will actually be within your power to experience a crowded, hot, slow, consumer hell type situation as not only meaningful, but sacred, on fire with the same force that lit the stars. Love, fellowship, the mystical oneness of all things deep down. Not that that mystical stuff's necessarily true. The only thing that's capital T true is that you get to decide how you're going to try to see it. This, I submit, is the freedom of real education, of learning how to be well-adjusted. You get to consciously decide what has meaning and what doesn't. That is real freedom. That is being educated and understanding how to think. The alternative is unconsciousness, the default setting, the rat race, the constant gnawing sense of having had and lost some infinite thing. I know that this stuff probably doesn't sound fun and breezy or grandly inspirational the way a commencement speech is supposed to sound. What it is, as far as I can see, is the capital T truth with a whole lot of rhetorical niceties stripped away. You are, of course, free to think of it whatever you wish. But please don't just dismiss it as some finger-wagging Dr. Laura sermon. None of this stuff is really about morality or religion or dogma or big fancy questions of life after death. The capital T truth is about life before death. It is about the real value of a real education, which has almost nothing to do with knowledge and everything to do with simple awareness. Awareness of what is so real and essential, so hidden in plain sight all around us all the time, that we have to keep reminding ourselves over and over, this is water. This is water.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen here so I can see all of you. I'm going to take a second and listen to what you guys have to say. So what did you think of the video? What were some initial thoughts?
And folks, you can feel free to unmute and come on camera or drop your comments into the chat, whichever is best or easiest for you. My comment in the chat was, I totally felt that grocery bag thing. Gosh, that's the most frustrating part of grocery shopping to me.
Thanks, Crystal. Other thoughts?
What are some initial reactions? Yeah. Very quiet group today, Ron and Taylor.
Oh.
Well, I know personally, I can relate when you're in line and you're kind of in a rush and you don't want to be at the grocery store, but you have to go after work to get your groceries for the week. That can be very frustrating, and you do have to stop and think and make the right choice to be respectful to people. Can anyone else relate to any parts of this video? I know it's pretty long.
I totally agree that adulting is the toughest part of my day. Having to make sure that everything is taken care of, and, you know, as well as focusing on my job and just keeping myself together. Yeah, I like the video a whole lot. The grocery store gave me anxiety. I don't like the grocery store at all. I order my groceries online and then I pick them up. I can't do it.
Yeah, I feel like there. Thanks for sharing, Tasha. And Nikki Clausen, she says, easy to get frustrated when you're in a hurry. So Being organized and planning ahead of time helps. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Emily says, been trying to stay conscious of the fact that everyone else in life is feeling the same anxiety and frustration. That was definitely a point in the video. Yeah, thank you. Natalie, as a mom, I don't want to be judged for moments of weakness. She tries to give others the same grace that she would want to receive, especially in public. Yeah, the video said the fat and overmade mom yelling at her kids, you know, her spouse might be going through cancer treatments. Definitely resonates that. We'll pause for one more moment and see if we get any other thoughts. Okay, well, thank you everybody for sharing. I'm going to go ahead and pull up our PowerPoint again. Okay. So some things that we're going to cover today. We will be defining emotional intelligence. So talking about what emotional intelligence really is. We will be connecting intentional decision-making to our big picture goals. That is the why for emotional intelligence, or the case for why it's useful in our day-to-day life. And then we'll finish the day off by talking a little bit about our new EQ curriculum called No Choose Give. That is really the how piece for how to implement emotional intelligence with a practical model. So we're going to go ahead and get right into it. We're going to be breaking out into 2 different groups. We'll have about 6 minutes to talk, and Taylor and I, we will jump into one of the groups. We're just going to be flies on the wall listening to your conversation. So we probably won't say anything, but go ahead and try to come up with a definition of emotional intelligence. After we come back together, we'll see what each of the 2 groups shared, and see if we get a common definition, see if our definitions are different. So Crystal, if you could go ahead and divide us. Again, we'll be defining emotional intelligence in our groups today.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's going to be about 12 of you in each room. And again, if 1 or 2 of you would be kind of the people designated willing to speak out for your group, I think that would be a good way to do that. So we'll pop that question into the notification. And again, about 6 minutes, Ron and Taylor, is that what you said?
Yep.
Okay, so let's get them into the rooms, and then I'll start a timer and we'll go from there. So thanks, everyone. If you don't know how to join, you'll just have to click go to that room. Let me get them back here and then I'll take you downstairs. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back from your room. We'll just wait a moment for people to come on back. All right. Okay. Taylor and Ron, it looks like most everybody's back. We did, excuse me, we did have a couple of people who had to leave the call temporarily. They had an emergency. So I'm going to just let you take over the facilitation part of the question.
Sure.
And I'll be right back. I need to step away from the computer for just a moment, okay?
No problem. All right, so we had a pretty good conversation in our group, but I'm gonna open it up to the room. So defining emotional intelligence, what did we talk about? What are some potential definitions that we decided on? Some thoughts. So go ahead, unmute yourself. We'll take a minute or two to talk.
I can share for our room, which was the first breakout room. What came up in our discussion was really just awareness of your own emotions and thinking and processes and those of others, trying to understand those of others. So really being in tune to that and being able to adapt accordingly. And someone also talked about empathy as being key to emotional intelligence.
Thanks, Alex. So a couple key words I heard in there: empathy and awareness. Yeah, those will be keywords going forward. Thanks for sharing.
Is anyone from the other group willing to share?
Okay, that is totally fine. Yeah, and then we had Ashley share in the chat that she set safe places up for her students to process and work through difficult situations. So that was nice to see as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go back to our PowerPoint here. So defining emotional intelligence, what is EQ? EQ is blending thinking and feeling to get you closer to your big picture goals. Ooh, I lost it there. Let's pull it back up. There we go. So yeah, blending thinking and feeling to get you closer to long-term goals. Anyone can learn emotional intelligence skills at any age. And EQ, it leads learners to a life of higher life satisfaction, more fulfilling and enriching relationships, better work, and more awareness of your decisions, and more awareness of how other people are doing. So that's what emotional intelligence is. We'll go with that definition of thinking, blending with feeling to get you closer to your long-term goals going forward. So does that make sense to everybody? We can take a second to pause, and if anybody has any questions over our definition, we can kind of take a second to pause before we move into why emotional intelligence is really important, although you guys have already gotten kind of a taste here. Okay, we can go ahead and move on. So again, we talked about what emotional intelligence is, and then why is emotional intelligence more important now than ever? So we're coming out of a pandemic. I think a lot of people saw that working with technology all the time leads to high stress levels and feelings of isolation. You know, as technology advances, people become more in demand of the things they want. I notice that people are sometimes more hostile and they feel like the video said more in a frame of mind where they think that they are the center of their own universe and that the universe essentially waits on them hand and foot, to put it in some kind of creative terms. So rising stress levels, feelings of isolation, what does that do to people? Well, it puts people in their brainstem or their limbic system. It's not a healthy way to live. And then people generally feel like they're subject to the environment that they're in. So like that fellow at the grocery store, he could choose to either be a subject to the rat race and live an unhappy life where he felt out of control, or he could flip it to the other side and he could get power over his thinking and really feel like he has freedom within his life. So there are two ways to go. You can either be stuck in your brainstem or limbic system and feel powerless, or you can use emotional intelligence to put yourself into your frontal lobe, clear critical thinking, and then you have power over your own decisions. So brainstem thinking, what does it do? It puts us into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Again, it's not a healthy way to live. Nobody wants to be there. You can hurt others without being aware of it. You have no awareness really of your own decisions, and it's not good for you long term. So emotional intelligence, more important now than ever because of technology coming out of a pandemic. We see that with kids being on iPads. It's way easier to be in your brainstem if you're on an iPad. So we're going to talk a little bit about emotional intelligence coming to play at work. I know that in our breakout session, we heard a little bit about how emotional intelligence comes into play at their work with students. So we'll be breaking out again. Crystal, I think this time we'll be breaking up for about 4 minutes. Again, you can talk a little bit about how emotional intelligence comes into play. You can think about that relationship that emotional intelligence has with technology. And then you can think about the definition of thinking and feeling. So Crystal, if you could divide us into our breakout sessions again for 4 minutes, that would be wonderful.
Everyone should be on their way back in.
Thanks, Emily. Okay, we'll give it just another second, see if anybody pops back in. Looks like we have everybody. All right, so hopefully you guys had a couple minutes to talk. So emotional intelligence, when do you see it coming up at your work? I know we have some teachers on here, maybe some counselors, after school professionals. So you can talk a little bit about emotional intelligence with your kids. Some words that Alex dropped earlier were empathy and awareness. So I'm going to leave it up to you guys, and you can share a little bit about what you talked about. But yeah, how does emotional intelligence come into play at your work?
I can talk for our group. We just talked about, just being able to recognize and be aware of your own emotions helps you to know how you're going to react when you are meeting new people. Maybe new people are joining your team and things like that. So you have to kind of get to know how they react to things as well. But I think in the end, it does increase your leadership and your team's performance. And I think it would help reduce turnover and also help with just decision making and making that a little bit less stressful.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Nikki. Yeah, a big part of emotional intelligence is relationships, right? So if you're going to be a good leader, reduce turnover, work well with new people, the key word there is relationships. So emotional intelligence, we'll talk about this more later, but it really helps enrich your relationships. And we'll talk more about how the No Choose Give curriculum can do that. But yeah, it helps with leadership, helping other people, reduce turnover. Yeah, so thanks for sharing, Nikki. Any other thoughts? And feel free to leave them in the chat as well. Okay. All right, well, we are going to go ahead and go back to the PowerPoint here. So an interesting factoid about emotional intelligence. This blew my mind when I learned it, but when EQ is prioritized in the workplace, workers are 22 times more likely to be high performers in areas of employee retention. So Nikki said turnover, productivity, customer focus, and future success. So for context, smoking cigarettes only makes you 8 times as likely to develop cancer. So we look at smoking cigarettes as a pretty surefire way to get cancer, to get lung cancer. Well, if that's only 8 times as likely, to say that emotional intelligence does these things 22 more times likely is huge. So again, it just helps emphasize how important it is for emotional intelligence to be in your workplace. So we are going to go ahead and we have a couple more breakout sessions. We have 2 more. So if we're in a perfect world, everyone has high emotional intelligence skills. I know my emotional intelligence skills could get better. Everybody's, let's say in a perfect world, they are as best as they can be. So how would your work benefit if everyone you came across had high emotional intelligence skills? So Crystal or Emily, this time again, we'll be doing 4 minutes. Go ahead and share. I think we'll sit in the main room and we'll leave our microphone on. If you want to come and sit in the main room with us and talk a little bit, we're totally open to doing that. But yeah, 4 minutes, we'll see you back and we can share a little bit out.
Yeah, thank you. And again, my apologies as I had to step away there for a moment, but we'll get everybody into those rooms and we'll give you 4 minutes on the clock. Thank you. I'm so sorry about that, Taylor and Ron. I had to step away and I was like, oh gosh, what am I gonna do here? So my apologies for that. So,
That's no problem. Yeah, no, Emily divided us just fine, so.
yeah, thankfully she was able to take over for me real quick. So again, thanks.
Mhm.
Thank you.
No problem. Just grant writing. So anything to pull me away from that is a blessing.
It's fun for us too. We don't get to talk about this stuff very normally, so it's just nice to hear kind of people's opinions about it. You know, a term that we use all the time, and I don't think people really get an opportunity to sit down and talk really about what it is. So, yeah, just fun.
Okay. I'm going to close down the breakout rooms to bring them all back. So they should be joining us shortly.
Thanks, Crystal.
That was maybe just a little longer than 4 minutes because I forgot about the 1 minute build in.
Yeah, that's no problem. All right, we'll give it another minute here and wait for everybody else to pop back in. Okay.
Looks like breakout room number 2 is maybe just wrapping up a discussion. So they should be heading back very soon.
All right. Here we go.
All right. Welcome back, everyone.
Okay, so I am ready to hear you guys. So in a perfect world, if everybody had high emotional intelligence skills, how would things be different? Go ahead, unmute yourself, leave it in the chat. We'd love to hear you.
I can share for our group again. What came up in our group when I took notes, so I would remember a little, is that if staff had really strong emotional intelligence skills, then that would really go a long way to helping the kids have those skills. And someone gave the example, it's like the oxygen mask in the airplane, where you're supposed to help yourself first before you can help others. So if you aren't able to handle your own, that's going to make it difficult for you to help others. And someone shared that just having these skills would make people in general happier to be in that space, to be working there, to be participating there, that kids really can read energy from staff. And so being, coming in with that positive energy and being able to cope with situations as they arise. We also talked about parents and families as part of the puzzle in this kind of programming. So if parents and families came in with those skills, either when you're bringing them in to have a conversation or even just what they're sharing with their kids at home, that would be very helpful. And someone brought up the family engagement part of 21st century learning centers and how maybe that could be a way to engage and support parents in this area. And then the final thing that came up was a program at one of the sites called Leader in Me, which is really about understanding yourself, and it's based off of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Ah, okay. What was the name of that program, Alex? It was In Need?
Leader and Me, if I got that right.
Okay. Yeah, so right, it comes from the top down, right? So if your staff don't have the emotional intelligence skills, how can you expect to teach the kids the emotional intelligence skills? So, modeling, coaching, just showing how you handle conflict, or if I were to make a mistake in front of the kids, just having the awareness of myself to say, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. This is what I'm going to do to atone for that mistake. So yeah, just doing that in front of the kids so that they can see. And then parents and families being a part of the puzzle. Yeah, absolutely. We work so heavily with the kids, but we only have them for so many hours in the day, and then they go home and they're with their parents. And a lot of it, comes from how the parents model and coach their emotional intelligence skills, or, sometimes they lack some emotional intelligence skills too. So yeah, everybody's a part of the puzzle. It's the cliched phrase, it takes a village to raise a kid. That's so true. So yeah, kids would just benefit so much if everybody had higher emotional intelligence skills, for sure. So we'll take a second, and if anybody else would like to share anything that maybe they had talked about in the groups that wasn't mentioned by Alex yet, we'd love to hear. Okay, well, that is just fine. We will go ahead and move on in the PowerPoint here. So I'm going to go ahead and share this again. So we will probably not break out for this last one. I think we'll just go ahead and pose the question to the group. we'll let everybody unmute themselves and kind of just talk freely as one big group. So we've talked about why emotional intelligence is important. We are going to start the section of how to implement emotional intelligence. I think everybody's in conjunction on the call where we have a pretty good idea of what it is. We know it's important. So how to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the main group here. So how or what can you do to make learning emotional intelligence successful? What are some pieces that you have to put into play before you even start to do the work?
I think you have to have an open mind, and you have to really listen and be an empathizer, because not everybody is the same.
Yeah, being open, being an empathizer. No, not everybody's the same. Yeah. Thanks, Nikki.
I think it helps if you're talking about your staff to have a foundation of rapport and trust and just those relationships and kind of knowledge of each other, comfort around each other to be able to dig into these kind of things.
Yeah, trust and having that rapport with your teammates. Yeah, if you're working on emotional intelligence skills, sometimes things are going to get uncomfortable. You know, sometimes you might hear something about yourself that you don't like. So being in an environment where you really feel like you can be comfortable to say what is really on your mind, you know, where you're not being afraid of the judgment that you might get from other people, you know, that coupled along with having an open mind and being an empathizer, those are huge. You have to have all of that before you can start doing the actual work for emotional intelligence. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and go back to our PowerPoint here. So prerequisites to do the work. Nikki said it well, but being open, again, change is hard. Sometimes you have to listen to things that make us uncomfortable. One of my favorite phrases is, people don't change unless they're made uncomfortable. The same goes for kids. You know, we get into old habits, old routines, and sometimes that's when we start falling into the brainstem thinking or the limbic system thinking, where we're just kind of floating on autopilot, like the man in the video in the rat race. So being open, having that just feeling of comfortableness and trust with your teammates. The second one, valuing relationships. You know, when you're working on changing as a team, you have to have some shared accountability. So you have to value the people you work with, you know, listening to what they have to say, knowing that they're going to say things that you might not like, but then knowing that you're there for each other and that you're willing to do the work, willing to move through the messiness as a team. And the third main point that you have to have before you can start doing the work is having intrinsic goals. So we'll talk a little bit about what those goals can look like later, but intrinsic goals, you know, feeling good about the progress you're making, feeling like you're ascertaining some sense of control of your environment, being able to breathe openly through that messy, uncomfortable space. So those are some things that you have to have in place before you can do the work. The next piece that we're going to talk about are some myths associated with change. So change is hard, change is scary. We can think of a million reasons to not change. And Taylor and I, we've heard some different myths or some different reasons that people like to basically come up with to avoid change. We're going to dispel some of them here. So the first myth is that change is a solo action. It's not. If you're changing as a team for the betterment of your kids, again, you have to have trust for your teammates. You have to have some shared accountability. Change is hard, and you know, we like to put all of the pressure on our own shoulders. That's really not how it should be. We, you know, can rely on each other. You know, some days we're going to come in at 40%. Some days we're going to come in at 100%, and we can share 20% with somebody else. So change is not a solo action. We have teammates for a reason. The second myth is that change is rational. We like to rationalize a lot of things. A lot of people who work with kids like to be fixers. I'm sure a lot of you are fixers with your own teams. Change is not rational. Sometimes what you're doing doesn't always seem like it makes the most sense, and you're not totally warmed up to the ideas that you're kind of working through. And then if you're, changing your emotional intelligence skills, you're going to be working through a lot of tough emotions. Emotions are not always rational. You're not always going to have a reason for why you're feeling the way you're feeling. But just being open and accepting of the way you're feeling, that's the approach that, we see works best, is to just be open to that messiness and that uncomfortable feeling. The third myth that we hear a lot is that change is linear. It's not. This is kind of a cliched phrase that, change goes up and down. Again, you're going to have some days where you're at 40% and you're going to need to call on your teammates to kind of support you and be there for you. So change is not linear. Sometimes you're going to feel really discouraged, like, oh man, I snapped at my group of kids again today. Like, am I ever going to come out the other end feeling better about myself? Well, eventually the work has to happen. And sometimes the work is hard. So being forgiving of yourself, being accepting of those hard feelings. So the next thing we're going to talk about here, we're going to break emotional intelligence into 3 steps. That'll help us segue into the curriculum. The curriculum is divided into 3 steps as well. But the 3 steps that we're going to divide emotional intelligence into today kind of go as this. So the first step is to become more aware of what you're doing. So Alex mentioned awareness. That's the first step. Noticing your behaviors, your thoughts, and your feelings. When we're living on autopilot, a lot of times we don't even know what direction we're going into. So it's just noticing how you're reacting. I think Nikki mentioned earlier and Janae mentioned earlier that, you have to know the triggers that you have before you can start working on those triggers. The second step is to become more intentional with your decisions. It's to know that all of your decisions, should basically support a reason. Like, why do you do what you do? So it's doing what you mean to do rather than being reactive to your environment. By brainstorming more options, that's going to help you pull yourself out of autopilot mode and help you put yourself into intentional decision-making mode. The third step with emotional intelligence is to be purposeful with decision-making. So being intentional with your decisions is different from being purposeful. Being purposeful is acting with reason. So when you're intentional with your decisions, that's really brainstorming, looking through your options and selecting one on purpose instead of simply reacting. If you're being purposeful, you're associating a reason with the choice that you picked. So when we say reason, it's not a short-term goal, it's a long-term goal. So if you're with a student and he's really struggling to tie his shoes and you've got everybody else lined up, ready to move outside, and you've got your kid here, he's really, really struggling, you can sit down and just tie his shoes with him and just get him out the door. Or you can have everybody take a second, pause. You can work through tying the shoes with the student and teach them the steps so that next time with practice, they can tie their own shoes. And then they can do it on their own after practice, and then you won't have to tie their shoes with them anymore. So acting with reason, your long-term goal is that you want the student to have the skill of tying their own shoes instead of just doing it for them so that you can get out the door, which would be your short-term goal. So these are our 3 steps to using emotional intelligence to make better decisions. We're going to talk about how the KCG model comes into play here. So the first section in the KCG model, we break it down as an acronym. So noticing your thoughts, feelings, and actions, we call that knowing yourself. That's the K. The second step, your choice, brainstorming options and using the most appropriate action, we call that choosing yourself, the C. And the third step is reflecting on the outcome of your choice. So did you get what you really wanted out of that situation? Did you get closer to your big picture goal, your long-term goal? Or did you just put a Band-Aid on a wound? We call that giving yourself. So that's how it's broken down: noticing thoughts, feelings, and actions, brainstorming your options, and reflecting on the outcome of your choice. Knowing, choosing, and giving yourself. So this is a little visual model that Taylor put together for the sake of the presentation. You can see how it's divided into the 3 sections. So again, what we do, that's the knowing. How we do it is the choosing. Why we do it, that's the giving. So we're going to take a second and kind of pause here. If you have any questions or if you have any other insight into how you're already doing the work, you can take a second to share. We'll pause for a moment. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and go back here. So yeah, we'll pause for questions for a second. And if you have any questions over the outline of the KCG outline, you can go ahead and ask.
I had a little question about the give. Just reading the prompt that you shared, reflect on the outcome you chose or why we do it. I'm having a hard time associating that with give. What's the idea? Where does the giving part fit into this one?
Well, so the giving part is where you really kind of look at your goals. So with the choose part, you know, your choices are kind of like on this side, your goals are kind of on this side. So with giving, you're just looking at your big term goals. So in the KCG curriculum, there are 35 concepts that are kind of split into the 3 different categories. So some of the give skills are like your noble goals, empathy, healthy relationships, independence, conflict management. So those are some of the skills that you try to instill with your students. And they're separate from your choose skills. Some of your choose skills are like anger, stress tolerance, emotional regulation. So when you look at your choose skills, they really break down how to pick the best choice. Your give skills remind you of what is truly important in that moment. So does that make sense?
So is it what you're choosing to give to others? It's the word give that as a label doesn't make sense in my head.
And I struggled with this too when I first was learning this. And think of the choose as like all of your choices that you have like laid out. Your give is your commitment. Like, what are you going to commit to? What are you going to give yourself to? Which choice? And think like it doesn't always have to go in a perfect circle. You may have to go from no to choose, back to no, maybe choose to give, back to choose. It's not always in a perfect circle, but I definitely struggled with that give at first too. And it's like, what are you giving? And once I thought of it as like your goal and your commitment, what are you going to commit to get to your goal? And that's what kind of made sense for me. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
Great. All right. Any other questions? Okay. We're going to go ahead and go back here. All right. So we're going to take a second and talk about goals. So how do goals really help us change? The KCG curriculum, it lays out a really clear model. The model is actually called the CLEAR model for goals. And it's an acronym. So the 5 letters, the first one is collaborate. That calls on you to prioritize the relationships with others. It helps instill that shared accountability that you have with others. The listen helps to begin the empathy process, to listen openly, geez. And know that you're going to hear things about yourself that you might not like and that you might become uncomfortable with some of the things that you have to hear. The E stands for empathize. Going back to what Nikki said earlier, you have to know where the other person is coming from and really feel the feelings that they have. Again, it helps kind of prioritize the other people in your life. It helps kind of remind them how important that they are to you. And empathy, you know, empathy is important for those long-term goals because, you know, ultimately what you're trying to do is get closer to others and make others happier, bring them closer to what they want to have as well. And empathy helps with that. The 4th letter is adapt. So we say, you know, change, it's going to go up and down. It's not linear. You're going to have good days and bad days. The A with adapt, it's just knowing that sometimes things aren't going to go the way that you want them to go, and to just have an open mind and to be ready for the messiness. The R is reward. that calls back on those intrinsic goals that we have. So when we say reward, some of the rewards that we look at are feeling like you're more in control of your decision making. You know, you might see some rewards in how your kids are responding to how you're talking to them. So if you have struggles kind of coaching kids through conflict resolution, well, if your conflict resolution skills with adults get better, then when you model those skills in front of the students, they're going to pick up on that and they're going to start to do better themselves. So seeing that and really feeling their progress is where that reward comes from. So again, that's how the CLEAR model kind of breaks down how goals can help us as we're working through the KCG model. So to summarize the outline of the KCG model, the K is know yourself. It's what we do. Those are thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. The choose yourself is how we act. Those are our choices. And the give yourself is why we do what we do. And those are our values and our goals. So here are our 35 concepts. We're going to take a second to pause. You can kind of look through them and see which concepts kind of fall into which category of the know, choose, and give. So I'm going to ask the group, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. I won't go back to the main room here because I want everybody to kind of look and see all of the concepts, but go ahead and just take a second and share which ones stand out to you. And Crystal, this will be a good time if you want to take that link to the handout and share it in the chat. Our participants, you know, you can go ahead and click that link. We have a copy of this image on the worksheet that Crystal is about to share, so you can pull it up and look at it as we go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me get that popped into the chat right now.
Does anyone want to share on any of these concepts that maybe you think you could work on, or a lot of people pick their spouse that they could work on, or any coworkers, or something that you just feel needs to be made a priority in your organization?
Okay. Well, that's no problem. So yeah, these are all 35 concepts. So when we actually do the curriculum, oh, did we have somebody speaking? I'm sorry for talking over you. Go ahead. Oh, okay, that's no problem. All right. So when we would actually go through the curriculum itself, we would break we take a situation, a problem situation where we did not get the outcome where we wanted. And we essentially role play and talk through it. So we break it up, we break the situation into these 3 steps. So what were you feeling in that situation? What were you thinking in that situation? How are you acting in that situation? That will all go into the know yourself. In the choose yourself section, what options did you have? So if you were to put yourself back in your shoes in that moment and you were to brainstorm, what are all of the things I could have done? You include the good, you include the bad, you include the ugly. When you do this with kids, it's really fun because they can come up with some really creative things. Like when we have kids playing dodgeball and 2 kids argue over who gets out. When you brainstorm the decisions that they could have made, you know, sometimes they might say like, oh, I could have pushed you over and sat on you. So they come up with some pretty creative things. So the good, the bad, and the ugly. Then you move into the give yourself. So in that moment, what did you want in that moment? So if you're working with 2 kids who are playing dodgeball and they argue over who was out and you were to role play with them, what did they want? Well, they just want to have fun and play dodgeball. So you would help them kind of work through that and to identify their noble goal as, we want to get back to the game, but we also want to make sure that we're following the rules of the game and kind of go back to fairness. So fairness would be the key term there. So what options do they have? Well, they could have gone to an adult and asked the adult who would have been out. They could have fought physically. They could have just decided that, okay, you're going to sit out this time, I'll sit out next time. And then what do they truly want? Well, they want fairness. So they're gonna go to an adult and they're gonna have the adult tell them who was out first, so that the adult can help them instill that fairness. So again, what were you feeling, thinking, and how were you acting? What options did you have? And what did you truly want in that situation?
Does anyone have a situation that comes to mind off the top of your head? Maybe we could try to work through one together. We have some examples, but I'd rather take yours if you have some. It could be personal, it could be work, whatever you're willing to share. All right, should we go with ours? Because Ron and I did this last night preparing for this. We had to go through this whole process.
Yeah. So we did come up with a couple example scenarios. I think for the sake of today, we'll probably just do the first one. So using positive self-talk is one of the 35 concepts. And that is a choose concept. So positive self-talk, since it is a choose concept, it helps you pick the best decision. It helps you work through that brainstorming process. So with positive self-talk, we'll pick a situation. So I'll say, talking in front of a large group of students. When I first started working with students, you know, sometimes I would get anxious if I had to talk to the whole group. So what was I feeling? Anxiety. What are some things that I was thinking? The group is going to not listen. They might make fun of me. They might try to talk over me. I might not be able to get them to listen quietly. What am I feeling? Again, anxiety. I might feel some tension in my chest, sweating. My hands get really sweaty when I'm getting anxious. Let's see. I get tunnel vision sometimes. So those are some things that I was feeling, some things that I might be thinking. What options do I have? Well, if I were to use the positive self-talk concept, then initially some of my options would be to ask somebody else to do the talk for me. Well, I'm not getting what I truly want out of the situation, which is to put a Band-Aid on the situation. What I truly want in the situation is to develop my skills as a public speaker in front of the kids, to become a better teacher, to work on crowd skills when I'm working with students. So some options that I might have, if I don't use positive self-talk, then I would just go to somebody else and I would say, hey, I'm feeling really anxious about this. I can't do it. I need you to do it for me. Positive self-talk diminishes that. It gets rid of that feeling. Positive self-talk, when you do it, you say things out loud like, okay, I'm a good public speaker. I can work with students. The students are going to be interested in hearing what I have to say. The activity that I have is going to be a lot of fun. And I need to get up there and I need to take a deep breath and be confident. So those are some options that I have, some positive options, and they help align myself with my goal, which is to become a better teacher in front of a large group. So that's a rundown of how positive self-talk can help in that situation. So does anybody have any questions kind of over how that works, or any other concepts you might want to kind of use a situation for?
I feel like I have this talk inside my head every time I get on the treadmill.
Positive self-talk, yeah. It helps, it really does. I know, like when I first started doing KCG work, you know, a lot of times it was like, oh, I don't really need these skills. Like I can just move on. Like what I'm doing is fine. That's living on autopilot, right? And then actually using the skills, it's like, oh, I'm not doing the best that I could be doing here. But yeah, positive self-talk, that's one that I use a lot.
And one thing that I notice that helps too in going through these steps is the pause. Because sometimes I jump to conclusions or I overthink situations, and I really just need to pause and really tune in on knowing myself and what I'm actually feeling and going through those options in my head, because once you get on that autopilot, you don't know what's going to happen. So the pause is very important to me when going through this process.
Okay, well, we will go ahead and move on to our final steps here. So if you are interested in getting some more information on the KCG curriculum, like I said at the beginning of the presentation, Taylor and I would love to sit down with your team, talk about some different concepts that you would like to work on a little bit more. You know, the KCG training, it's great for educators, but it really applies to a variety of settings. The person who trained us in the KCG, she works with college students. She's worked with police departments, accountants, so a pretty wide variety of professionals. So if you really have any kind of like issues that you're running into with your teams, or emotional intelligence would really help alleviate those problems, you know, we'd love to just sit down and have maybe like a half-hour conversation with you and your team. But our contact information is there. Feel free to give us an email. And we'd love to hear about some of your situations. KCG, it aligns with the CASEL standards. So if you would even like to talk about some specific situations with your students, you know, we can work you through those situations and kind of give you some tidbits, give you some different concepts and kind of how they would help alleviate your problems with your students. But the 5 standards that CASEL has, the KCG curriculum, you know, there's some specific language in there that helps align really well with CASEL.
We do have a survey too. I'm going to stop sharing because I need to be able to give you guys access to complete it. But if Brittany or Crystal, sorry, it looks like you just dropped that in the chat.
Yes, I just did.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. And then it looks like everyone should be able to access it now. So if you guys would be willing to fill that out for us and give us some feedback there, if you want more questions, concerns or anything, we would appreciate all feedback. It's always helpful. So just let us know. And like Ron said, if you're wanting more information, let us know. We'd like to sit down and chat with you guys. Want to hear more.
So Taylor and Ron, thank you so much for your presentation today. Again, if there are any questions, please feel free to unmute right now and ask those. You can also drop those into the chat. 2 links that are going into the chat now is, again, the Google form that Ron and Taylor would appreciate having some feedback on. And then I've also put the SurveyMonkey link in there again from Emily's presentation today. So if you can grab both of those and complete those are always really great feedback to have, lots of really good information. If you missed Ron and Taylor's emails, you can always go through me. I'm happy to make connections for people, but Ron and Taylor, do you want to pop your email into the chat as well? I think that could be really helpful for people.
Yes, and it is also at the bottom of the handout. If you're wanting that, if you can check that out too, but I will put them in here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Barb, did you have a question? I see you're on camera again. I just wanted to check in with you. Okay. All right. So we have about a little over half an hour before our next presentation. Let me just pop up here again. I want to share the agenda with everyone so you can see where we're at for the day. So we said we would take a break at noon. It's just a little before noon for lunch. Our next presentation will start at 12:30. That again will be Malai and Dr. Anthony Jones. And we are asking, you can do one of 2 things. You can leave the call and then join back in, or you can just simply stay connected. I will be here the entire time. Of course, I'll be off camera and muted because I am also going to grab some lunch here as well, but you are welcome to hang around. But we would love to have you back by 12:30 for that presentation. If you are going to dismiss yourself from the meeting or leave the meeting, I will absolutely bring you back in when the time comes. So whatever you prefer, whatever you'd like to do, that would be fine with me. At any time, if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And I am going to pause the recording during this time so we don't have all that dead space. So, all right, welcome back from lunch, everyone. I hope you had a good lunch. My daughter was kind enough to make me a bowl of macaroni and cheese. So I'm gonna eat that, I think, off camera here in just a moment. I want to welcome you to our afternoon session. So let me go ahead and grab the agenda again, show everybody where we're at. So our afternoon session features Malai Amfar, who is with Iowa State University Extension and Outreach, and Dr. Anthony Jones with the Ames Community School District. They will be presenting on centering equity and critical consciousness in youth programs. And we're really looking forward to their presentation today. So I'll go ahead and take off the agenda so that we can do that. Again, we welcome your input and feedback. If you would like to unmute during the commentary section or use the chat feature, that would be fantastic. So thank you and welcome to Malai and Dr. Anthony Jones.
Thank you, Crystal. And I just have one correction. I'm with United Way. So yeah, it's okay. It doesn't matter. It's still the same person, gosh. So don't worry about it.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. I bet Anthony was like, oh, you changed jobs? What's going on? Anyway, I want to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon. I hope that we've got 20 folks that are on this call, so hopefully that will lend to some nice communication and conversations as we move through this material. We did have a presentation in March, or at least I presented it part 1. So many of the components that you'll hear from this series is just a refresh of some of those topics that we discussed in part 1, really setting the stage for Dr. Jones to go into concepts about critical consciousness and how that applies very directly to education and youth programming. So I do have some slides, of course, a slide deck to share, and please do interact with us. It really helps to bolster the information that we'll be sharing for you to either unmute or to share in the chat. And I've asked Crystal to monitor the chat so that we don't miss any comments or questions. So I'm going to go ahead and screen share. So please bear with me while I move technology around here so we can get to a space where we can talk. All right. So what we're going to do is start out in Mentimeter. So what I would like for you to do is open up an internet browser just for this quick icebreaker. Just put in www.menti.com and then this code 8006-8124. Crystal, if I could have you please put this in the chat, and then I'm going to stop sharing for a second so that we can walk through our Menti today.
Malai, can I have that code again real quick, please?
Oh yeah, sorry about that. Code is 2797-8246. I think I gave you the wrong code on the screen. So yeah, that'll be for everybody.
2797-8246.
Yes, ma'am. So let me go back to screen sharing. And you have your question there, which is, what is your role with your after school program or 21st Century Learning Center? What we're wanting to do is just really see who's in the room. And I'm going to project my screen so that we can see the results. And if you didn't catch that code, it's going to be at the top. And hopefully everybody's seeing who's in the room. So it looks like we've got quite a number of directors at your center, some admin, consultants. We'll wait just a second so folks can get signed in. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to move to the next question. Okay, so you should see on your device or your screen, which one of these practices have you adopted within your program or center? So this kind of helps us to see, what kinds of things have you been doing at your own center in relation to diversity, equity, inclusion topics? There's quite a number of choices here. So I'm excited to see that someone has responded, included parent, caregiver, youth voice, and program design. That's outstanding. Discuss DEI topics at staff meetings. I believe I have this set up so that you can choose maybe more than one as well, if you've done any of the other 2 activities. When we get into the discussion piece about 4 areas of change, you'll see these options really reflected in those, just some really concrete actions that you can take at your program or center that really begins to infuse equity in the work. Alrighty, so I'm going to move to the next question. Are you familiar with the topic of critical consciousness in education? The bulk of today's session will be on this topic. We're going to educate today, Anthony. I'm excited about this. Cool. All righty. Okay, I'm going to move to the next one. This is the last one. You get to share a little bit about what you're excited to learn more about. So what is one thing you are excited to learn more about today? Awesome. We will talk about that. Critical consciousness strategies for implementation. We'll talk about that as well. Awesome. How critical consciousness can improve programming. Anything else? What else are you excited to learn more about today? All of it. Thank you for that. Just one more minute here for you to get your response in. Awesome. All right. So we are going to get right into the material. So let me close that out. Hopefully you're seeing. Let me know if you can't see. All right. So are you seeing my PowerPoint?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. So what we'll do in the next couple of minutes is to just really establish some foundational terms and to really refresh your brain back to sections of part 1, or if you missed part 1, it doesn't matter. This is going to be some nice foundation for us to establish as we move into the main topic, which is about critical consciousness. So one thing that I really want to establish foundation with is this idea of definitions between differences of equality versus equity, or really what are these 2 terms that we hear so much about and how are they different? So at this point, you've got on your screen 2 pictures that really visually show this concept of equity in reference to equality, or how the 2 are maybe slightly different. So if you could just take a second and absorb these pictures that you're seeing, and then either respond either by unmuting or put it in the chat, and Crystal will read your responses. But what are you seeing? What do you see right away as differences between the 2 terms, equity or equality? What are some main differences?
Again, folks, don't be afraid to either unmute or pop your comments into the chat.
Yeah, you can pick either picture too, if you're really centering on the picture on the left or the picture on the right. What do you see as maybe some of the differences?
It seems like
Equity gives everyone a chance, different levels, but everyone receives a chance to get the apple.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that comment. Yeah, so like if you're looking at the picture on the bottom right, we've got the boxes with the apples. Apples can maybe represent opportunity or education, and right on. Everybody's having a chance there. Thank you for that. Any other comments that you're seeing as differences?
So the chat box is starting to fill up.
Okay.
Natalie says equality is when everyone is given the same tools. Equity is when everyone reaches the same outcome.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. Nikki says equity shows that people have different circumstances, and equality and inequality, people are given the same resources.
Yes, thank you for that.
Melissa says accommodations are provided to create equity. Sam says equality is when you're given the same thing, but equity gives people what they need.
Awesome. Okay, so I think you guys are kind of getting the idea here. So I do have this with some more defined things that are really reflective in your comments, and also, is it I want to make sure I'm saying your name right. Is it Tazia?
It's Tasia.
Tasia, thank you. I promise I will get it. People mispronounce my name all the time, so I want to make sure I say that right.
It's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so equity and equality are connected. They are connected quite definitely, but they are different concepts, obviously as displayed in the photos here. The idea here is that strategies are needed to ensure equality, simply because there have been historical or systemic things that hold barriers in place for many of the children that we're serving. And so equality is really aiming to promote that fairness, whether that be in an outcome in a program or something bigger, but it can only work if everybody starts from the same place, which we know that that doesn't happen. And so equity is that pathway towards equality and recognizes that individual needs are there to achieve similar outcomes. So we have a visual that Dr. Jones is going to work through with us. And so I need to get out of the PowerPoint for a second and shift.
Could I just, Malai, just for a second, can I pull a quick audible? Do you mind if I share my screen instead? It probably work a little smoother for me.
Go for it, yeah.
Okay. But before I do that, again, I want to say good afternoon to everyone and thank you for joining us in learning more how to serve our students, especially our historically marginalized or underserved students. And I just want to personally say, especially for me being a part of the school system, really appreciating the work that you all do, especially in terms of supporting our students with after school programming. I want you to know that, I really believe that the school system cannot serve our students alone. And so I really believe that it takes a community. I've used this statement, I've kind of stolen the phrase from an old African proverb that it takes a village to raise a child. But I kind of flipped it and I started to say that it really takes a community to raise a school, because it takes all of us as a community to really make the school system better. And so, as you know, a lot of the students that many of you, students and families that you work with, you really know that the school system can't do it alone, because within those after school programs, the learning still needs to happen. The relationship building needs to continue to happen. The sense of belonging needs to continue to happen. And so I want you to know personally from the school system perspective is that we really appreciate your partnership with our families. And so I wanted to take that time to say thank you. I'm going to share my screen a little bit here in just for a few seconds because, as you can tell, there are many definitions out there around what is considered to be equality or equity. And so if I could make this bigger here, let's see. I'm gonna make this bigger so you can see it. Is that good? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So some of you may have been in presentations and you've seen the visual where, students are on the other side of a fence and there's someone that's short, there's someone like middle height and tall, and they're standing on the same box, they're behind a fence, they're at a baseball game. But you see the fans on the other side, and then that visual has grown over time to where you see there's ultimately no fence, in terms of removing barriers, right? And so that is supposed to present what equity means and inclusivity. And I've always joked about that picture as we grow in our understanding, because, you know, in terms of what true equity is and what access and inclusivity really means, is that with that visual, those 3 students or kids should be sitting in the stand with the fans. So that's what true equity and access and inclusion means. They, you know, it's pretty dangerous when you see that first visual, which I loved it when I first saw it. It was just so cool, you know, in terms of the boxes and what typically we see in society. But, you know, we're always learning how to define and understand equity and the difference between equity and equality, so that we can understand how to implement our programming, our initiatives, so that our students can be successful in whatever they choose to be in life. And so, as you can see, again, I want to add to you another visual that I've just been thinking through in terms of my interaction with families within our district. And so the thing that kept popping in my mind was this visual of the scale. And so, you know, the balance scale. And so we typically, you know, we know from the very beginning that the educational school system started out as normed. And what I mean by that is that it started out where, you know, the only kids that can go to school, they had to be white, male, and most likely from an affluent or upper middle class background, right? So the school system started out in a system of inequities from the very beginning. Women were not allowed to go to school. People of color definitely weren't allowed to be in the school system. And so we come into this conversation assuming that the school system or even our community started out on an equal playing field, but actually it did not. Our system, and I can speak from our school system, it pretty much started like this, right? So you can see, you know, white, norm, male, able-bodied. Those are the only people that were allowed to be in our school system. So in terms of understanding the difference between equality and equity, you have to be able to understand first that our system did not start on a place of equality. It started from a place of inequality. And it's just like what Malai shared in the previous screen, that equality aims to promote fairness, but it can only work if everyone starts from the same place, right? So here's what I've seen that happen. So we know even when we began to respond and communities begin to advocate, well, you know, school systems are unequal, right? Remember segregation, it was separate. They assumed that it would be equal, but it was really unequal. Still, when you look at this scale, it comes from a place of inequality. Then desegregation happened, right? And so that was an attempt to counterbalance the scale. But even the 1954 Brown versus Topeka, Kansas, when they desegregated schools, it only infected the school just a little bit. Notice the scale did not move, right? And so what we tend to do, even when you think about equity and equality today, we'll say, well, let's give everyone a computer, right? But so we'll give everyone a computer, right? But notice here, everyone has a computer, one-to-one, right? But what we found is that even though all students may have computers, they may not have access at home. They may not have access to Wi-Fi. Doesn't make the system equal, right? So then we say, well, I can only talk from my perspective. Let's add social emotional learning, because we need to make sure that our system provides social emotional learning for all of our students. Well, that's for all of our students. It's not just for students who experience some great traumatic event, but all of us, all of our students need to understand the benefits of understanding how your emotions work in terms of how you interact with life, right? So that's for everyone. It doesn't change the system in terms of equality, right? Or in terms of addressing equity. You know, within our system, we say, well, we're going to start positive behavior interventions and support. That's for everyone as well. But notice the system is still in a place of inequality. When we start to address equity, right? When we really start to remove barriers and really address the issues where our students are failing, specifically our historically marginalized students, we begin to say, okay, well, let's start STEM programs where it's only focusing on the students who don't have access to it, right? So we may say, let's start programs that only focus on, you know, students of color, right? So you see that the scale kind of tipped, right? And so in terms of, understanding the difference between equality and equity, you have to understand that in our system, because we started in a place of inequality, equity means addressing students who are failing in our system, right? So with those who are in a place of privilege and power, it's going to feel like one side is getting more than the other. So for instance, when you think in terms of curriculum, school systems started out where most of the people we learned about was from a white male norm perspective. So from within our school system, we began to say, well, we got to make sure that there are more representation. And so we want to make sure that there are windows and mirrors, that students are able to see themselves in the book, and they're able to see the different stories and different people and genders and so sexual orientation involved in life in the books and the materials that they're engaging in every day. And would you know that when we really began to address equity, that some people began to feel like, that's unfair, that's not equality. But we're not talking about equality in a place where systems started off in a place of inequality. In terms of addressing equity, it's going to feel like, you're being oppressed. And so if I stop sharing my screen here and go back to the slide.
Yep, hang on, I'm there.
And I ran across this quote and I really loved it. I was in an article of the HuffPost newspaper. And this author put this quote in there. It says, when you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression. How about that? Even when you put in the concepts today, now think about the things that we have been divided on in our society, is that, when you're in a place of privilege, most of the time, everything that you've engaged in has worked in your favor. And then all of a sudden, the conversations start to deal with and address areas and people that have not been given the opportunities and access that you have, then it's going to feel like you're not getting something, right? But the only thing that is happening is that the people that have been underserved are now being given access and opportunities and resources. And so it's going to feel like oppression. Okay, go ahead. So how do we define educational equity? Educational equity is defined when educational policies, practices, interactions, and resources are representative of, constructed by, and responsive to all people. Now notice a mouthful here. So that each person has access to, meaningfully participates in. So that means that we're not tokenizing students. We're not just fitting a student, a Black student into a STEM program, but we want to make sure that they're not only engaging in having access to a STEM program, but we want them to meaningfully participate in that program and has positive outcomes from high quality learning experiences, regardless of their individual characteristics and group membership.
So I'm wondering if there are any questions at this point about the two concepts so far, equity or equality. And hearing none, I'm going to move us forward to another concept. So the concepts that I'll present just very quickly are just about 4 areas of change that are necessary in order to achieve this concept of equity. And then from here, we're going to talk more about critical consciousness in education and the purpose of education. So this is really it's here setting the stage for that. And so you can see in the squares there, I guess they're not squares, but they make up a circle, what those 4 areas of change are. So that is personal, interpersonal, institutional, and systemic. So if you just want to burn these into your memory for a second. So the first one is personal. This is very self-focused. So these are areas where you are taking responsibility for things that need to change. So it's your own understanding and your own education about these different concepts. So what it means is that you're working to understand your own values, beliefs, those biases that you may have that you're not even aware of, maybe some privileges that you might have. You're just really doing a lot of deep diving and reflection on where you are with many of these things that we're talking about today. So what this looks like in terms of action, I'm remembering from our mentee that there were some comments about really wanting to take this into an action-focused place. So these are some examples of what could be done in terms of action. It means committing to lifelong education around DEI. It means having self-reflection about how you're feeling about the topics, if there are things that are triggering, or if there are things that you know that you need to work on, or things that you want to educate others about. It also means speaking up to disrupt inequity when you see it happening. Then on the flip side here, we have a relationship-focused level. So this would be the interpersonal area of change. It's all about relationships at this point. It means how we relate and view others, especially for those students or those youth or those individuals that are typically excluded from groups. So this means how we also share power, how we're looking to surface issues of inequity within relationships, and how that plays out in our society. It means that we're acting to support inclusive practices, and we prioritize collective voices. It also means that we're lifting up those voices, especially those for those that are excluded typically. How this translates into action means that you recognize your own privileges as step one, and then you leverage your own personal power and authority to lift up those voices of youth who are typically marginalized or excluded. So if you think about yourself in the role of a director, you do have some personal power roles of influence and authority within your center. And so it means leveraging that sense of power that you might have to be able to lift up those voices of those students that are more marginalized. It means intentionally seeking to build relationships and allyships around efforts that support equity. It also means that you seek to understand the perspective of others, using a lot of empathy here, especially those populations who are most at risk for oppression. But we can't stop there, because within those two areas of personal or interpersonal, we also have to address this idea or concept of power, which is really held at the institutional and systemic levels. So here, for the institutional area of change, it means applying an equity lens to policies, practices, regulations, cultures, all of those things that would be rules or guidelines, whether that be in a program or in a larger system, such as an entity like a school or an institution or a business. Look at all of the policies that are happening at that business, those practices as well, and designing policies and practices that advance opportunity rather than create barriers. Access to resources is a good example of that. So we want to ensure that there's access to resources for optimal development. What this looks like in practice or in action is this: to review internal programs or policies from this lens and make changes, especially if you're in a director, executive director role, or you have some seat of power. This is a great way to be looking at it in terms of how you can make institutional change. It means designing initiatives from the get-go that remove barriers, inequities, or in access to programs, services, and opportunities. The component we haven't talked at all about is data. Data is really important to be able to understand where there might be gaps. So it means reviewing disaggregated data. So that's data broken down by race, ethnicity, age. It could be lots of things that you're disaggregating. So look at that data in relationship to program elements and outcomes, and really try to understand or see where those gaps might be. So the system level, what we mean by this is just an entire network of institutions and people and individuals. So this is where individuals and groups recognize that there are relationships that are interconnected and that they resist change by nature. So we want to ensure that there are approaches that are developed that really address these connections, and that leadership is shared, and that there is collective power. So examples of action here would be to understand what those connections are between the various systems. A really good example that I can articulate would be the relationship between health and education. So we know that very simply, if children are hungry, if they don't have food because they didn't eat breakfast, or if they don't have lunch, for whatever reason, then they probably will not learn very much. And so to work across systems would be to ensure that all students have access to meals so that they can take their education to the next level. That's a really simple example. There are connections between systems, and so we want to work across those sectors to ensure that those connections are being made. Collaborate across sectors for solutions that ensure equity. Lifting up family voice, many of you responded that you do that you have student voice at every level program, including the board of director level too, if possible, and that you recognize and name those connections. It's also very important to understand that when you're looking at things from a system level, there could be unintended consequences as well as intended consequences. So part of that action is really trying to understand or think 3 steps ahead. What could perhaps be an unintended consequence of a particular action that could happen, in addition to what are the intended consequences of things as you're designing your programs. So why it's important to consider these as a whole rather than one piece by piece, even though we just kind of unpacked it piece by piece, is that there is a relationship between these 4 areas of change. So this is a diagram or example of how these things are connected. So if the mental model component here is at the bottom of the iceberg, this is those things that are not voiced. It could be your implicit biases. It's all of those things that go into human nature, individual behaviors. And so this is at the bottom of the iceberg, but it does influence the structure of the system, which influences patterns of behavior, which is here at the top, which are these outcomes. So how this translates into 4 areas of change is that your personal area is here at the bottom with the mental models. Interpersonal, your relationships influence the structure of the system, which influences patterns of behavior, which is here. The institutional level would be here in the midpoint. And then at the top, the very top layer is the systemic part. So what I would like for you to do is just kind of take a second. I went through this rather quickly, but I would really like you to focus on 2 of these areas of change and take just a couple of minutes to jot down some commitments that you might be willing to explore a little bit more within your own program of what that could look like in practice. So if you need clarification on any of these 4, I'm happy to go back a few of the slides, and then I would really like to share out some of these commitments that you're willing to just take a little bit more time to understand. And so you can either jot these down in the chat or unmute. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second so we can have a conversation. All right, so what do you guys think?
I can share something from my work. It's actually a project that I've been working on for the last several months, started at the end of 2020, but working with a youth-serving nonprofit that really wanted to dive deep into DEI work. So we set up a really thorough assessment of all the structures and systems and processes in the organization that we thought could affect DEI. So we looked at things around personnel like hiring practices and training practices. We looked at environmental things. We looked at communications, at decision-making, at what kind of DEI infrastructure was in place. And then we brought in a lot of voices to help us figure out which best practices we had in place and which ones we did not. And now we're in the process, now that we have all that great information, of starting to turn that into action plans. So we've identified core areas that we think are priorities to work on. And now we're starting to identify concrete actions we can take to really improve. I think that's your institutional one, really improve the different pieces of the work that the organization is doing.
Alex, that's awesome. Where do you work? That's amazing.
I'm actually working as a nonprofit consultant. So this is a youth
very nice
that I've been working with.
Cool. Great. Thank you. That's a great example. Thank you so much for sharing that. We have time for one more if there's anyone else that would like to unmute and share a little bit. And you know, while you're thinking about it too, I'll voice 21 Equity Day Challenge. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with United Way of Central Iowa. They recently have been sharing that very broadly across the state. 21 Equity Day Challenge came out last year. And I know that the United Ways Network is planning to do that again in a much more broad way as well, where you would get, if you sign up for this, you would get an email for 21 days about different things that you can watch or observe, whether it be an article or a podcast, really on these different areas. And just having self-reflection or thinking about that and what it means to you in your program area. So that's one opportunity that's come up. Okay, so hearing no other sharing, I'm going to go ahead and go back to sharing my screen, and then we'll get back into the PowerPoint here. So Anthony, I'm going to toss it to you. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Malad. So let's pause for a second. You know, I'm going to talk to you about critical consciousness, but I'm just going to walk you through some of the things that we've done in our district and conversations that we've had with our teachers and administrators in our district. And so, you know, before we get to what is critical consciousness, I wanted to just pause a little bit to just kind of see where we are in terms of, you know, what do you believe is the purpose of education? And so we always want to start there. Sometimes we kind of, you know, jump in the car and, you know, we can't even find, it's a new car. We don't even know how to open the gas tank, you know? And so for me, I'm just like, let's pause and just kind of see what do you believe is the purpose of education? What is the purpose of school? So I want you to think about that for a few seconds. And then I want you to write down, you know, find a sheet of paper and just jot down on, you know, your notepad or a sheet of paper that you have near you. Write down what you believe is the purpose of education or the purpose of school. I'll give you a few seconds to kind of gather your thoughts. So can I have someone to either unmute yourself, maybe one or two people unmute yourself and share something that you wrote down. If you want to put something in the chat, please do so as well. What is the purpose of education or the purpose of school? Don't be shy.
Must be kind of a shy group this afternoon here. So. All right, again, folks, if you are, we do have somebody. So Sam has said to help all children reach his or her potential.
Nice, thanks, Sam.
Natalie says school is a safe place where children are exposed to diverse opportunities of learning, which help them reach their full potential. And Tasia says it's needed. I'm sorry, and Tasia says it's needed to help you make it in life.
All right, thank you, Tasia. Okay, go ahead to the next screen, Malad. So there were two researchers that actually conducted some research around that one question, you know, the purpose of education. And what they found is that U.S. public schools operate to address one or more of the following. And so they were able to break this down in terms of the data that they collected in terms of 4 concerns. And the first one, they said that people typically fall within these 4 concerns. The first one being egalitarian concern, which means quality of, you know, people believe that the purpose of school is for quality of educational opportunities, to create opportunity for individuals, and then, you know, the phrase education as the great equalizer. So, you know, if you fall within that, you know, you believe that education equalizes everything and gives people more opportunities in life, then you will fall in terms of the egalitarian concern. The second one is economic concern. So if you fall within this area in terms of what you believe the education, the purpose of education or schooling is that you believe that is to equip citizens with needed workplace competencies and skills. And so, you know, and this can range from many different areas. Your thought could be that, you know, we need to have someone to, you know, when I go to McDonald's or Burger King, we got to have somebody to hand me my burger, right, and my fries. So, you know, it's to put students or kids or people into the workforce so they could keep the society going. And we were able to experience that in conversations a little bit in our society during the pandemic. And then the third one is civic concern. So the purpose of education for those who fall within this area is to ensure that citizens are prepared to participate in public life or to own U.S. national identity or pride. And so you may hear some of these concerns kind of circulating in our society as well, especially in terms of, you know, how people feel about critical race theory or the 1619 Project. No, I'm not going to tiptoe around those topics, but I think it falls within the civic concerns, is that the purpose of education in school is to teach our young people to have United States or our country, American national identity or pride. And then there's the humanistic concern that education is a fundamental human right for everyone, the right of each individual to develop their highest potential, right? So these researchers say that people typically fall in those four concerns or those four areas. The reason it's important for us to investigate what we believe that the purpose of education or schooling is, because that's how we interact. That's how we implement, you know, our programs, our initiatives, our lesson plans. That's how we teach within our schools. That's how we lead our buildings. That's how we lead our facilities. Probably from one of these four areas. And sometimes there may be some overlap, right? So let's do this for a second. I want to see where we all fall in this space. So if I look at the participants, we have about 19 participants. So what I'm going to ask you to do is go back to the menti.com website and then type in this code that you see on your screen, 69918748. Thank you, Crystal. And it's in the chat.
Anthony, would you like me to stop sharing? So
Yes, if we can have Crystal share her screen, because we want to see where we all fall in terms of what we believe the purpose of school or education is. And all I want you to do is kind of look at those four choices that I shared with you and just kind of pick and choose where you fall. And if you find yourself kind of in between, I want you to kind of choose the one that you kind of lean, like it's your go-to, like when somebody asks you about, hey, how can we implement something to make students successful? This is your go-to in terms of, you know, what you believe the concern is or the area for the purpose of schooling. So Chris, can you share your screen so we can see?
Yeah, it's not in real time, so it's only asking me if I can get the results through an email. So I just submitted for that.
So let me see if I can share. So, and I think I may be able to share my screen here. Give me a second. And so you should be see here.
Okay. And I do have it now, Dr. Jones, so I can show that.
All right, great. Thank you.
1 second here and I'll grab it.
Nice. Thank you, Crystal. So as you can see from the participants in this space, we have about 5 who falls within the humanistic. We have 3 in the area of civic. And then we have 1 who falls within the egalitarian concern. And so I want you to know there are no right or wrong areas. I think it's just always good for us to understand in terms of what we believe the purpose of education is, what the purpose of schooling is, and even what the purpose of your programming, your after-school programming. Is it, you know, your after-school program is to make productive citizens in our society that can go into the workforce. And so I think it's important for us to understand that. What I do want you to see from this diagram is important for us to understand that, you know, I can only speak in terms of the school system that I work in. Now imagine being in a school building where, you know, each teacher goes into their classroom and let's say a third grade hallway, and we have 4 third grade teachers in our hallway. We potentially can have 4 teachers in third grade to teach from a different perspective, right? They believe that the purpose of education could be, you know, again, to build U.S. national pride or identity, right? We could have 2 teachers in that one hallway who believe in that, you know, the purpose of schools, when I look at my student, the purpose of education is to make sure that everyone in this classroom is their fundamental right to be educated. And then you may have someone, you know, who just believe that, you know, it's about building the economy. We want to get good workers that can listen, that can be compliant, and all of those, you know, concerns in the third grade in one hallway. And I think it's important for us as we hire, and I love the fact that someone said earlier that in terms of addressing equity, all the way down to who we hire in our facilities. And so even when we're asking interview questions and we're debriefing and we're talking about the candidate and what they shared, I think it's important for us to kind of listen and tune in to what they believe the purpose of preparing a young child for life, right? Because I think it speaks a lot in terms of how we see and address the inequities and the barriers in our system that we sometimes interact with. Okay, thank you.
Crystal, so if you could stop sharing.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was just going to ask, do we have anybody who wanted to share a comment based upon what you saw from the diagram?
I know personally for me, I felt like I could have a little piece of me in perhaps each of those sectors too. So trying to make a simple choice that maybe wasn't as simple for me. So
yeah. And that's great, Crystal, because again, we don't want to go in thinking one way, right? And again, that's the important part about being a continual learner. We always want to investigate where we started, and then we also want to say, okay, now let's investigate this a little bit more, right? Let's be more aware of in terms of my own thinking. I think it gets into what Malai was sharing with us earlier about that personal aspect in terms of how do we address equity, right? And so it's good to have that personal learning. And so one of the things we really begin to see in terms of understanding the purpose of education and falling within those areas is that, yes, we want to make sure in terms of equity, we want our students to feel good about themselves. We want them to have a sense of belonging. We want them to be affirmed, but we also want them to go out and get a good job so they can be successful in life, right? We just don't want them to graduate from high school and then be unemployed, but they feel good about themselves, right? And so it's good to be able to understand that from your starting point. Thank you for sharing that, Crystal. All right, I'm ready, Malai.
All right, thank you.
So it's interesting when you think about it, and I was able to look at, you know, again, I went back and reviewed the 21st Century Learning Grant and many of the programs that you are a part of have access to those grants in terms of funding. But as I began to think about what's the purpose of education and what's the purpose of schooling, I said, let me go back to the Department of Education and see what they believe is the purpose of education. And so I went and I found their mission statement. And so the U.S. Department of Education mission statement states this. The purpose of education, or their mission, is to promote student achievement and preparation for global competitiveness by fostering educational excellence and ensuring equal access. So I'll let you look at it again. So if you could, just quickly, put in the chat some words that stick out to you from their mission statement. Global competitiveness, yeah, equal access. I'm glad that the 2 people that I saw first off the bat, you know, global competitiveness and equal access. Let me talk about those 2 words for a second, because again, when I first looked at the statement, those are actually the 2 phrases, global competitiveness and equal access, that stuck out to me. And I'll explain to you why, you know, it stuck out to me personally. because, you know, I grew up, I'm a very competitive person, right? And so, first of all, we need to understand that the Department of Education, when they, in terms of thinking about the mission statement of their department, especially centered around education, is global competitiveness, right? And so I don't know about you, but anytime that there's a competition, what that means is that there must be winners and losers, right? In a competition, somebody has to win, somebody has to lose. And I've used this example many times. You know, we're in, you know, in Iowa. And so every year, September the 13th or second weekend in September, there are two teams that play each other. Iowa State Cyclones, Iowa Hawkeyes, you know. And so these two birds go at it in September. And so for me, in terms of a competition, I am going to the competition because my team has to win. None of us will feel good at the end of that game if it just ended a tie, right? Especially the Hawkeyes, because they've been beating us for a while. I'm a Cyclone fan. I graduated from Iowa State. So because if the Hawkeyes tie, at the end of the game it's a tie, the Hawkeye fans know that we're gonna ride that for the rest of the year. We know we're gonna say, oh man, we tied the game. So that's just like a win for us, right? But the same thing in terms of education, in terms of competition, people kind of frown upon when we begin to talk about, you know, no grades, right? We're not gonna have grades, right? We're not gonna have special programming where there's a talented and gifted program, or, you know, that because all the classrooms are gonna be the same. Why? Because we've been raised to believe that school is about competition as well. There must be A's, there must be B's, students who must receive C's, and then students, you know, are going to get D's and F's. When I was in college, some professors believed that, you know, if I have D's and F's, that means that I'm a good teacher, right? If everyone is getting A's, some professors believe that that's not being a good instructor. So we carry that mindset into the school system, and as you can see, within the Department of Education, global competitiveness is there, not only from within our own system, but also globally across other countries. We're always measuring ourselves to others, right? Because we want to know who's the best. But how do you have that and equal access, right? And it's very difficult to have competition and equal access because there got to be winners and losers. If everyone gets A's, if everyone is in the talented and gifted program, why do I need to put my students are all A honor roll bumper sticker on the back of my car, right? Because if everyone is receiving A's, then there's no need for me to get a bumper sticker to receive the acclamation of my child being an A student, right? And I'm just being, you know, I'm being very sarcastic, but we have to think about this mindset of how we've been raised to believe in the school system that there is a competition. We want to see, you know, on a spelling test, did you get 100? You know, did you get everything right, right? Students, we're always comparing ourselves to each other. And even from the department that oversees the way we implement education within our school system, there's this idea that there must be competition. Okay, let me go on. So again, that's the definition that I shared with you earlier. We got to drill into our policies, practices, our interactions. So in order for us to begin to understand, you know, education, the mission statement from the Department of Education, we have to look at data. And so that's one of the things that we start to do within our school system. We begin to look at racial disparities. And so some of the things that I'm going to share with you is basically ranges from 2010 to 2016, and then 2010, and so, or 2020. And so many of you know that we just had the census right before the pandemic. And so data is going to look kind of like a little shaky because of the pandemic and things being shut down. But I think we were able to get a lot of the data that we needed from the 2020 census. And so I do not have that current information within this slide, but I wanted to show you some data that we noticed. So just in Iowa alone, approximately 4% of Iowans are Black, but Iowa consistently has one of the highest rates in the nation for locking up Black people, with a Black person in Iowa being 11 times more likely to be incarcerated. In Iowa, about 30% of Black people own homes compared to 75% of white people. Okay. When we look farther into racial disparities, when we look at the employment rate for white residents, the average is about 4.4%. For Blacks, it was 14.1%, more than 3 times higher. Now, the pandemic expanded this, right? So we haven't even collected the data on what that looked like during the pandemic. Just in Iowa alone, the median household income in Iowa for white families is around $52,000 or $53,000. It's almost double that of Black families, which is around $27,000. 3% of Iowans are Black. Again, 3% or 4%, it kind of fluctuates. It has grown over the years, but represent 23% of the state prison population. I can go on and share with you more data. I can share with you some data that we've collected within Ames Community School District, but it's just for something that's drop in your mind just for thought, okay? So why do you believe these disparities exist? And so if we would have had enough time, I would have had you to kind of put it in the chat. What do you believe? And so typically we kind of hear, you know, these reasons why disparities exist, you know, especially in the school system. Single parent home, dads in jail, lack of parent involvement or engagement, family income, laziness, lack of motivation for students. That's, you know, that's why we're seeing this data. Lack of intelligence and smart, lack of parental education. Some of you may have said, you know, the reason these disparities exist is on the other side. Should go to the next slide. Maybe you've heard this. Maybe it's because of educators' behaviors or biases, institutional bias or systemic racism, identity development or individuals, culturally irrelevant curriculum. Maybe it's because, you know, they're not seeing themselves in the curriculum that we're teaching them. Lack of access to high quality teaching, low teacher expectation, limited access to rigorous coursework. So just quickly before you go to the next slide, I should have called.
Oh, no, sorry, Anthony.
That's okay. That's okay. So if you look at the two sides, what do you think is the difference between the side that is in blue and the background that's in Black with the white words? What do you think the difference between the two? Anybody, you can unmute yourself or you can put it in the chat. Internal versus external factors. Excellent, thank you, Alex. Thank you. Anyone else? One more. Alex, if we was in the same space, I would have given you your favorite piece of candy or something, or Ames Community School District button or something. I don't know. Anyone else?
Someday we'll be in person.
But I like what you said, Alex. Like one side is internal and then the other side is external. One of the things I want to highlight, and then I'll go into what you just saw, the trailer that Malai flashed in front of you.
Sorry.
Is that, you know, when you look at the side that's on the left, it's about blaming the people that we serve. And look at the list again. It's about blaming the people, the students that we serve. On the other side, it's about blaming or taking the responsibility within the system to address the iniquities, right? So one is about blaming the people that you serve, and the other side is about taking responsibility for what the system needs to do to address those disparities, right? And it depends on, you know, again, your mindset. And so again, what is the purpose of education? It's always about investigating what you believe about that. What is the purpose of schooling? But then there's another mindset that we have to investigate within ourselves first. When we look at the disparities that we see in our society, when we look out and we see, you know, young people and how they interact with life, and what do you attribute that to or contribute that to, depends on how you address students when you have them within your program. And so if you have a mindset that's on the left side, that is about single parent home, mom or dad are in jail or on drugs or whatever that list may be on the left side, understand that that mindset is about blaming the victim or blaming the students that we serve. But when you begin to say, well, it's because of things that have been embedded in our system. Remember, our system started in a place of inequity, white male norm. So maybe there's some things that we need to change in our system to make it more equitable. It's about having this mindset. Go ahead and go to the next screen, Malai. So on the left side, that's a mindset that comes from a deficit perspective. On the right side is about critical consciousness, about understanding what we need to do as a system to remove barriers. And I'll go into a little more detail about critical consciousness in deficit mindset. Another thing I want you to know from what you saw on the left side and the right side of that list is that on the left side, research has debunked that that's the reason for the disparities that we see in our society. There's been many research that we have where when students come from a place of poverty or a single parent home, when the system has adjusted to make sure that they are successful, then students can be successful, even though a parent may be in jail, even though they come from a single parent home. We know many stories where, we have the documentary about somebody, they come from a horrible background, right? We know that when systems are put in place for them to be successful, then we know that that background does not affect them, right? But we also begin to understand that research has proven that when school systems, and I can speak from school systems, when we begin to look at educators' mindsets or biases, we begin to look at institutional racism or practices within our system, we begin to look at our curriculum and how we make sure that it's relevant to the population that we're serving, that students can be successful when we begin to address those areas. Next slide. So what is deficit mindset? Is when teachers or school leaders focus on problems rather than potential. Or as I mentioned earlier, deficit thinking blames already marginalized people. Remember, they come from a place of already being marginalized. Why would we continue to blame them for the disparities that we see in society? That comes from a deficit mindset. When we blame already marginalized students and families for the fact that the system fails them, further perpetuating inequities. Not saying that, when we look at students that, yes, there must be some responsibilities that our students and families must address, but we need to make sure that the system is set up in a way that they can be successful. So we both have a part to play, but who has the power and the privilege within that system that we're serving our students and families? So just quickly, I received this diagram from two professors, Fratura and Capper. And they were looking at social justice within the educational system. And what they began to do, just like I explained to you earlier, they began to just walk us to what happened from the beginning in terms of how the system started off in a place of inequity. So schools were historically normed, as I mentioned earlier, white, male, and norm. But then, in that system, students failed, and then they went back into the community, where most of the weight is placed upon our after-school programs, our community organization. You see that? When schools are historically normed, the responsibility falls on the community. Students go back into that community with limited opportunity. School system continues. Then within historical perspectives and timelines, the system says, okay, we're gonna force everyone must attend school, up until the age of 16. So compulsory education, right? Then it went from there, and even within that, school systems were still segregated, as I mentioned earlier. But guess what? It was segregated by race, by disability, by class, by language. Everyone still was not together, right? We were still not together. And even within that structure, students went back into their community with limited opportunity. Next slide. Then, of course, the Brown versus Board of Education. Even when they say, okay, separate was separate and unequal, that's not constitutional. Let's change that. Let's make sure everything is separate or together or desegregated and equal. But even in the system of desegregation, students still failed, and they went back into their communities with limited opportunities. Then what the school system began to do we begin to track students, we begin to put them in separate programs, and then we develop programs from within our system. And guess what? Even when we added at-risk programs, even when we added all these different programs to address students failing, students still went back into their community with limited opportunity. Poverty, as I shared with you, that quick data, the little snapshot, incarceration, unemployment, homelessness, none of those things change. Norm unchanged, we just continue to put bandages on the situation, right? Just add another program and hopefully, you know, students can be successful. Maybe we can get one, right? But even within that system, students still return to their community with limited opportunity. So for a system perspective, we begin to understand that we need to begin to look at critical consciousness. So quickly, let me share with you, and again, this comes from one of the organizations that we work with out of Indiana, Purdue University, Midwest and Plains Equity Assistance Center. And one of the things that we adopted from them was this definition of critical consciousness. The willingness and ability to see how power and privilege are at work to systematically advantage some while simultaneously disadvantaging others. So in order to understand what critical consciousness means is that, first of all, in order to have a critical consciousness mindset, you must have a willingness and ability to see that in one system, right, how power and privilege work and how it works, that even in a school system, even in your programs that you oversee, that even though in a place of inequities, that very system can advantage some. And so that's why people don't understand, like, why are we talking about, you know, equity? Why do we keep bringing up that we need to change our curriculum? Because I've been successful. When I went to school, I was successful and I turned out well. You know, we begin to have those conversations because that very system advantaged some. But at the same time, it disadvantaged others. And so just from a ground level of foundational understanding in your mindset is at least have the willingness and ability to see that both can happen at the same time in a system. That your system literally can have one group of people be successful and at the same time, other groups of people be unsuccessful in that very same system. Also, it means that you need to have the ability to critically analyze the social forces that constrain individuals and communities within systems of inequities based on protected classes, race, gender identity, sexuality, so on and so forth. And to engage in individual or collective action to redress social inequities. And again, I know that's a mouthful, but in terms of critical consciousness, we can have a truck full of data and a storage bin with data, right? And what happens is that when we collect the data, we still continue to see that, you know, in terms of race, in terms of ability, in terms of gender, that typically, academically, we see that white and Asian students are doing well in our system and Black and Latinx students are failing in our system, right? We typically see that no matter what program, a school system, we typically see that particular data throughout our system. The reason that critical consciousness is so important is because we need to critically analyze it. Why? So we don't fall into a deficit mindset. Well, Black and brown students aren't successful in our system because they come from a single parent home, or parents don't have enough time to be engaged in their education, or there's a lack of motivation. White and Asian students are doing well because of whatever you want to like label it and name that. And that's called confirmation bias, that we see the data, but we don't critically analyze it to understand the social forces behind the disparities that we see. Not trying to force anything on anyone, but at least it causes you to pause individually and reflect on your own belief system, reflect on it, and then look up and say, okay, from my position of influence, from my position of power and privilege, what can I do to redress or change the system that I'm seeing in front of me? Okay, next slide. So I just put this visual here. And so in terms of critical consciousness, it's basically about raising your awareness. It's about helping you to be able to recognize the inequities that you see in your circle of influence, to be aware, right? You can't change something that you can't see. So you got to be able to recognize it. You have to have a willingness and ability to see it first, right? You got to see it. There are inequities. And then you have to be able to raise your consciousness, your awareness, to be able to see how are you complicit in it, right? Whether you have done something to contribute to the disparities, or whether you have been silent and have not said or addressed anything, right? So you at least have to come to a place of recognizing your position in the system that you work in. And then I love this one. We have to be literally like little kids, right? We got to be like kindergartners or first graders. We always got to ask why. Why? Well, we're gonna start this program, and no, we can't provide transportation. Why? We have to just ask the question. Why are we not going to provide transportation? Because when we're literally working with families who are poor or within poverty, whether it's situational or generational, we have to understand that, well, we might need to provide transportation for them so they can have access to the programs that we're trying to implement. We always have to ask the question, why? Who is not benefiting from this decision that we're about to make, right? So we have to question everything. And then we have to reflect. And I love this image, because we live in a society that has taught us to, everything has to be immediate. We have a meeting today at 3 o'clock and we need to have a decision by 3:05. You may have heard this phrase, knee-jerk reaction or knee-jerk decision. And so within critical consciousness, it teaches us to reflect. We have to pause. We teach our students from day one when they enter the system, when the bell rings, you move, right? We have first period, we learn about math. Second period, we learn about social studies. Third period, we learn about science. Fourth period, we get the opportunity to have a break to eat. And you only have 25 to 30 minutes to eat. And when the bell rings, we go to another subject. Then we go to recess, and then that's only for a designated time, right? There's no opportunities in our school system and even in our structure to reflect on our practices and what we're learning. And then we go into adults, and then we have to be to work at 8 o'clock. Then we eat lunch at 12. That's why when you go to eat lunch, you got to stand in a long line because everybody eat at 12, right? Because we've been taught that in the school system. And so we take that practice on our job, and then we live this life of rushing all the time with no opportunity to pause and reflect. And so what critical consciousness means is that if we're not recognizing, we can't recognize because we're not reflecting. And we can't change anything because we're not questioning, why do we do these things? Why did I go to school all my life and I've never learned about Tulsa massacre, right? Why did I go to school all my life and I never learned about Emmett Till, right? So it's like those things that when you talk, you tend to reflect and ask these questions of why, right? Because we've never had the time to reflect. Next slide. So again, we want to come to a place that once we reflect, we know something now, we've read it, we've learned it, we've gone to webinars and trainings, we learned about critical consciousness, we learned about mental models, right? We know, and when we know and we learn, we begin to see things, our consciousness is raised a lot better, we recognize things a lot better, we're more aware of what's happening around us, and then we respond, right? We respond to what we see. We don't be silent, we don't cover our mouth, we don't cover our eyes, but that we respond to the inequities that we see in our system so that students and families can be successful, right? Okay. We redress it. And what I love about this particular diagram is that, when we talk about addressing something, like I address the issue. And basically what that means is that you call it out, right? Why do our Black and brown students, our historically marginalized students, continue to fail in our system? Why do we continue to build facilities and we don't have access, accommodation for those students who are in wheelchairs or unable to go up steps or whatever, right? Why do we continue, right? So we address it, we call it out, but then when we respond, we change it, and we change it by redressing it. That's why you hear phrases out there such as dismantle a system, right? We have to dismantle. Why would we build and attach something that hasn't worked in the first place, right? Why would we continue to attach programs and initiatives and never address or redress the root cause? And so critical consciousness will have us to say, let's redress it. Let's dismantle it and start over. And the last thing is that we have to cultivate it and sustain it. We have to continue to learn. We have to continue to know how our society is constantly changing. I love the fact, so I'm like literally watching basketball last night. And I was like, this is interesting. Usually in sports, and we're watching, ESPN or TNT, and I'm watching basketball, right? Usually most of the commercials are geared toward a male perspective, kind of like this machoism type of thing, right? All the commercials are centered around it. Last night, I noticed for the first time that they were advertising different commercials and shows with addressing LGBTQ, like movies, commercials where you see same sex couples. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. I've never seen that before, right? Society is changing. So we always have to learn what is happening around us, and then we have to cultivate our system, our programs, and then we have to change it to adjust. Doesn't mean that it's bad, because we're trying to serve the people that enter our programs, that enter our school system every day. Then we have to cultivate it as we're learning and growing so it can be sustainable. Even on my wall, on my board, I have, 2 programs that I say I really think that should help our students who are failing in our system. And one is our extended school program, so 8 to 3:30 may not be enough to help our students, right? So we may have to extend our school day. We may have to restructure it and do some things differently than we've done in the past. And then the second one is our after school program. We need to reach out to you who are serving and doing the work. When our school system closes, after school programs, folks, you guys are like popping your fingers like, okay, it's our turn now, right? So how can we extend our partnership with our after school program? That's how we sustain it. And I have like question marks. How do we sustain it? Sustainability. Like, we don't want to just do something and, oh, that's fun, and then that director leaves and go to a new opportunity, then the system fails again, then we got to find somebody to kind of inspire us and build us up again. We want to make sure that our system is cultivated so that it can sustain. All right. So I heard there were some questions. Malai shared with me that there may be some questions in terms of within Iowa, anytime that there's some advancement, there is resistance, right? That's just historical. And so, Malai, I just went ahead and put this slide in here, and I don't know how you want to be able.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to stop sharing screen since we're looking at this Iowa House File 802 bill, which some of you may or may not be familiar with. Something that you just said, Anthony, is that there's resistance. That goes back to the slide that I presented on, maybe 20 minutes or so ago, where systems resist change by nature. And so this is one of those examples that I think of very, very, very much so, that a system is kind of like a band, like a rubber band kind of snapping back. And so there were some questions in the first part 1 in March about how we move forward with these kinds of discussions or sessions about equity. I know that the Department of Education at one point was going to host a social justice week. I had a team that was ready to do a presentation, and then we weren't able to do those presentations because that had been postponed. So Crystal, go ahead. I see you raising your hand. We just want to offer the floor for questions about this.
I'm sorry, is anybody else having a little trouble hearing Malai? Like, we're having some audio issues, I think.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, very much better.
Sorry, I don't know what happened there. We have a train in that goes past our office, so I don't know if that was the problem or not. Anyway, I was just commenting that there were some questions in that first part 1 session about this House File 802, and just wanted to give the floor over to folks that might be curious about how we move forward with workshops such as this that Anthony and I are doing today, or future workshops that you might be attending, and how we talk about it even amongst our own centers, in our programs, how we talk it amongst our peers, that kind of thing. If there are any burning questions that anybody might have of us about this topic.
Hi guys, I do have a couple of questions. Just want to say thanks, guys. This has been a really great, informative presentation. But yes, this bill has been on my mind pretty much the whole time we've been talking. It's a little, nerve-wracking going into this and having this kind of bill hanging over our heads saying, well, you can't do this, this, and that. So it's good to hear that there are some plans in the works for maybe to kind of help schools facilitate this and everything. But I guess I would be asking, where could we look for guidance maybe in the upcoming school year for, ways that we can do this without breaking that law?
One thing I can offer is the Department of Education. I know from the early childhood component, which is a space that I'm very deeply involved with, there are some teams forming around that at the Department of Ed to be able to talk about these topics within early childhood components. And Anthony, I don't know if you can have anything to share from the K through 12 space, but I know that that is in the works.
Yeah, what has been shared with me is that as soon as the governor signs that bill, and again, I haven't checked today, maybe the governor signed it today. I don't know. Things just happen so quickly, seems lately. But soon as she signed that bill, and many people do believe that she will sign it, that what goes into effect is that the Department of Education will respond to that signing of the bill, and they will begin to write rules and regulations for guidance for the school systems and programs. And so until that happens, nothing goes into effect. All we have right now is that the Senate and the House both approved it, and it's sitting on the governor's desk. As soon as she signs it, that's when the system goes in place to begin to write guidance for us to be able to follow, so that we won't get into trouble.
Right. I just want to point out Brittany Samuelson, who's our network lead for the Iowa After School Alliance, she did pop into the chat that we will also be sure to share out guidance and resources in our monthly newsletter as they come available pertaining to this as well. So look for those materials. You're also welcome to reach out to us if you have questions. We'll do our best to answer those.
In our slide, we've got some more language from this bill, so I do want to be sure to share that so that you can see the visual. Give me a second here to get there. So this is what's in the bill. Is that right, Anthony?
Yeah, so this is some of the language that you'll see in the House File 802 bill. And again, the colors don't mean anything. I just kind of wanted to change it up so that white background or blue background wouldn't blend into the letters. So I'll give you a little time to just look at that without me talking over you. So go ahead and read through that quickly.
This is a time too to offer if you have questions about, this language and what it might mean. Feel free to ask away. I think something too, I'll offer this, something that's been concerning to our team that does workshops with Early Childhood Iowa is that the one that's in yellow, that someone should feel psychological distress, like guilt because of their race or sex. I would say that that is concerning to our team because sometimes these conversations are what we call courageous conversations, and you might feel some stress anyway whenever talking about race or inequity or system barriers. And so that one is a little bit more concerning to our team. And we are looking forward to receiving some guidance about how we handle these kinds of conversations, because it can be already by its nature a stressful topic to discuss or talk about.
Yeah, one of the things I've noticed as I've read through this section as they define what they mean by divisive concepts, and that's what these bullets are describing from within the bill, is that, some people actually believe, not just Republican or Democrat, but in terms they believe that this is a good bill. This is like a good thing. And it's interesting because even as you look at, this list of what they would define as divisive concepts, I thought it was interesting that even if being if I'm a Black student within a classroom, and you are sharing with me something about slavery, and I've heard these stories before from some of our Black students, they're made to feel like, everybody is looking at me now because they're talking about slavery, right? So a teacher just generally just talking about slavery, could that parent, that student goes home and say, hey, my kid, we learned about slavery today. As a Black student, as a Black parent, my kid felt shame for you talking about slavery within the classroom. To me, like, it can go, it can go both ways. Or if I consistently show data that Black and brown students are failing in our system. And I'm telling you, I felt that just looking at data, and every time I see Black and brown students failing, I do feel some type of distress as a Black educator. And so does that give me ground to, bring a complaint to the school system? Because now as a Black educator and as a Black parent, I have students in the school system, that you're making me feel some type of guilt or shame because of my race. That's the part that's really tricky about this particular bill. It's going to be the OK corral in terms of complaints to the educational system. So the intent may have been, we're trying to stop this indoctrination, but the impact could cause more problems than intended. So I do want to put that out there. I have heard from other like institutions, such as some of the universities, is that, when you read that bill, it doesn't go into details in terms of you can't teach about slavery or oppression or things like that. One of the main things that's streamlined throughout the bill is not to blame one race over another for something that has happened throughout history. And what that means by that, meaning that, Iowa, if you're teaching or facilitating a conversation, you say Iowa is inherently racist or white people are inherently racist, then you could find yourself violating that particular law if it's signed, or bill if it's signed. So we really have to be able to understand how to facilitate conversations in a way that is inclusive and welcoming, so that people, even though you're convicted, that it's presented in a way that we're all here to learn and grow to make our society better. And I'm telling you, that's going to be, because we can't control people's feelings within a space. Just a quote here I grabbed from Dr. Paul Gorski, and if you've been in some of his presentations, from his one of his articles that he wrote titled Avoiding Racial Equity Detours. He says this: implementing a transformative racial equity commitment is difficult, especially if we face significant resistance. Of course, it's not more difficult than navigating racism, which many students, families, and educators of color endure. So do we. We have the will to align our actions with our philosophies. Do we have the will to align our actions with our philosophies? So I just wanted to leave you with that quote.
So I'm going to put our information here, and then we'll do a closing exercise. I know we're going to run just slightly over. But for those of you who are with us and you have questions of Dr. Jones or of myself, our emails are here. So you can jot that down. And Crystal, I know, will be sharing our slides as well to everybody that attended. So just a really quick reflective activity, and then we'll close with questions that you might have. And so just very quickly here, if you could just take a few moments to either jot down your thoughts or share or unmute. What are 3 important points that you have learned today? What are some things that squared with you or you agreed with your thinking? And what is something that is still circling in your head? So just maybe take a minute here to share out. I'm going to stop screen sharing so I can see people. Thank you for everybody that's here with us.
Yeah. Again, please feel free to use the chat box to record your thoughts to the closing activity. And also, go ahead, Tasia.
Sorry, Crystal. Well, I just wanted to say something before I got out. I'm going to circle back to what Dr. Jones was talking about the critical consciousness. You always look at kids and you're like, well, I grew up like this, and I turned out better. And I'm never conscious of, other people's struggles. Like I hear struggles, but you know, some people can't overcome those struggles that can raise them up out of that struggle like it did me. So I'm never conscious of what I'm saying. Like I am, but I never thought of it that way. Like some people can't overcome it.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Tasia. All right, so folks, it's now about 3 minutes after 2. It looks like maybe people are wanting to keep their final reflections a little bit private today, which is, of course, fine. With that being said, if there are no final questions, we will go ahead and thank our presenters today. So again, much appreciation for your presentation. We will put this recording on the website. If you give me a little bit of time to download the video, upload the video, and do all of the back office stuff, I will get that up and going as soon as possible. So I want to thank everybody for your time today and looking forward to the next time we see each other in person, which will be fall at the Impact Conference. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for having